The air was still, thick with the scent of damp earth and the faint rustle of unseen movements. Darkness blanketed the ancient forest, and the stars above shone like distant, watchful eyes. Somewhere, a deep, guttural growl reverberated through the silence, a sound that didn't belong to any ordinary creature. It was raw, primal, ancient. There's a moment when the boundary between the living world and something older, more untamed, feels paper-thin. The legends speak of this, of times and places where men stumble too close to forces that are neither human nor divine. These are the stories of monsters, not mere beasts, but beings that breathe life into fear, morality, and the forces of the natural world itself. The forests of India and the towering peaks of the Himalayas hold whispers of these creatures. These are places where even the bravest tread lightly, where the very ground seems to pulse with stories older than time. The Nagas, serpents coiled in the depths of rivers, their jeweled hoods shimmering like moonlight, are said to watch over their treasure hoards. Some call them protectors, others name them destroyers, but no one who has felt the chilling stare of their unblinking eyes leaves unchanged. In the hills, villagers speak of the Pishachas, the flesh-eaters. Their stories are told in hushed voices by fires that cast flickering shadows, as if even the light fears to reveal too much. These creatures are said to emerge where despair hangs heavy, feeding on fear, madness, and flesh. It is not the violence of their acts that chills the blood, but the cold precision of their hunger. Higher still, in the snow-laden heights of the Himalayas, there are stories of the Yeti. Footprints larger than a man's chest found in the fresh snow are enough to send entire expeditions retreating in silence. They say the Yeti is not a creature of malice, but one of untamed power, a force that embodies the untouchable wilderness of the mountains. Those who claim to have seen it describe an aura of immense, silent presence, a being that watches and judges without words. These monsters are not just tales to scare children or thrill listeners. They are woven into the lives of those who share their world. Every story has a heartbeat, a reason for being told. The Rakshasas, with their terrifying fangs and insatiable appetite for flesh, are not merely creatures of destruction. They reflect the darkness within, the unchecked desires and power that can corrupt even the most noble soul. When villagers recount tales of these demons, it's not just about a hero vanquishing a monster. It's a reminder, a warning, that the greatest battles are often within. But not all monsters are meant to be feared. Some are revered, respected for their roles as keepers of balance. The makara, a hybrid creature that roams the rivers, is said to carry divine energy. A guardian of the waters, it teaches reverence for life's most precious resource. To see a makara in your dreams is considered a sign of blessings, but to meet one in the flesh may mark the end of your earthly days. The lines between good and evil blur in these tales. Monsters are not mere villains, they are symbols, teachers, and reflections. The Nagas may rise in anger, bringing storms that flood the earth, but they are also bringers of rain, nurturing crops and filling rivers. A Rakshasa might haunt a forest, but their tales often teach the consequences of greed, cruelty, and arrogance. These creatures are shaped by the natural world around them. The crashing of waves, the roar of a mountain storm, the eerie silence of a dark forest, all find form in the monsters that haunt these lands. The Himalayas, with their towering peaks and endless snow, are alive with stories of spirits that embody the untamed force of the mountains. The Buddhas, wandering spirits of those who met untimely deaths, are said to roam the valleys, crying out in haunting wails. Their presence is not always malevolent. They are said to act as warnings, reminding travelers to respect the land and tread lightly. A chill wind whispers through the forests, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter, low, mocking, and distinctly inhuman. The laughter of Vetalas, the undead spirits said to inhabit corpses. They perch upside down in trees, waiting for unsuspecting wanderers. They don't kill, instead, they play with the mind, twisting memories, creating illusions, and leading their victims to madness. Their stories are not just warnings to avoid the forest, but lessons in humility and wisdom, for those who confront a Vetala must answer riddles to escape its grasp. The beauty of these legends lies in their duality. Each monster embodies the fears and hopes of a people shaped by their environment. The monsoons, with their life-giving rains and destructive floods, are mirrored in the Nagas. The isolation and majesty of the Himalayas find form in the Yeti. The forests, teeming with life yet hiding death in their shadows, give rise to Rakshasas and Pishachas. There's an unshakable sense of respect that comes with these stories. It's not fear alone, it's an acknowledgement of forces beyond human understanding, forces that command awe. These creatures remind people that life is fragile, that the natural world is both nurturing and unforgiving. They enforce morality not with words, but with their presence. A person who harms the forest may find themselves face to face with a Rakshasa. One who disturbs a river's flow might feel the wrath of a Naga. In the dead of night, when the world is silent and still, there is a sense that the monsters are watching. Not from malice, but because they are part of the land, the water, and the air. They are not entirely separate from those who tell their tales. In their reflection, there is humanity, its fears, its arrogance, its courage, and its hope. And in their presence, there is the natural world, vast and untamable, reminding us of our place within it. The jungle whispered its secrets, each rustling leaf carrying a tale of what had walked these paths long before humans came to claim the land. Thick vines hung like curtains, hiding shadowed clearings where sunlight rarely touched. The air was heavy, damp, alive with 1,000 murmurs. Somewhere in the distance, the growl of a beast echoed, a sound that didn't belong to any creature of flesh and bone. India's forests, vast and untamed, have always held a sense of forbidden mystery. In their heart lies more than trees and wildlife, they hold spirits and creatures of immense power. Beneath the ancient banyans, where roots twist into natural thrones, Rakshasas are said to rest, their gleaming eyes watching, waiting. In the stillness of the night, villagers speak of Pishachas that slip through the shadows, their forms too quick and twisted to fully grasp. These forests are not just alive, they breathe, listen, and guard their secrets. Deeper still, in the towering mountains, another world begins. The Himalayas rise like the jagged spine of the earth itself, their peaks wrapped in veils of snow and clouds. These mountains are not just a testament to nature's power, but a sacred stage where gods and monsters walk side by side. Every stone, every icy crevice, holds the weight of stories whispered across centuries. It is said that at the highest altitudes, where the air grows thin and the cold bites like fangs, the Yeti watches. Its footprints, massive and deliberate, mark trails where no man dares to tread. But the Yeti is not the only presence. Beneath the surface, in hidden caves carved by time, Rock-shaganas are said to guard treasures and ancient relics. Their growls are described as the very sound of the earth shifting. Rivers cut through this mythical landscape, their waters shimmering with life and legend. The Ganges, revered as the most sacred of all, flows not just as a source of water but as a living goddess. It is said that the Nagas, serpentine beings of immense power, make their homes in the depths of these rivers. Fishermen tell stories of seeing massive shadows moving beneath their boats, the glint of scales catching moonlight. To disturb a Naga is to risk a wrath that can bring floods and storms, drowning entire villages in its fury. Yet, for those who honor these beings, the rivers bring prosperity, cleansing, and life. In the stillness of mountain caves, another world hides, a world of echoes and silence so profound it feels like the mountains themselves are holding their breath. These caves are more than shelter, they are gateways. The Vetalas, undead spirits with their chilling riddles, are said to linger in these dark, forgotten places. Travelers recount the sudden drop in temperature, the oppressive feeling of being watched, and the faint sound of footsteps that never quite follow. The Thar Desert, too, holds its share of mysteries. The shifting sands tell stories of creatures long thought to be myths. Beneath the golden dunes lie ancient cities swallowed whole, and with them, spirits and beings that refuse to rest. The Churel, a spirit born from sorrow and betrayal, is said to wander the desert's edges, her form both mesmerizing and horrifying. Travelers are warned not to look her in the eyes, for they hold the pain of 1,000 lifetimes. Far to the south, the dense forests of Kerala and Tamil Nadu carry their own legends. The makara, a creature both aquatic and terrestrial, is believed to guard the backwaters and coastal inlets. Fishermen speak of seeing its massive form rising from the water, its eyes like twin suns burning with intensity. These are not just stories of fear, they are reminders of respect for the land and water, of the balance that must be maintained. In the northeast, where mist clings to the hills and rain falls in endless sheets, the forests seem to hum with a life of their own. The locals speak of the spirits of the forest, protectors as much as they are punishers. Here, the creatures are less about terror and more about reverence. The forests are alive, and those who disrespect their boundaries risk encountering beings who will remind them of their place. The natural world in these regions doesn't just host monsters, it gives birth to them. The crashing of waves on the Konkan coast echoes with tales of monstrous sea serpents. The roar of a Himalayan avalanche feels like the voice of an angry Rakshasana. Even the silence of the desert holds the weight of something unseen, something that watches and waits. These creatures, whether in forests, mountains, rivers, or caves, are not just guardians of their domains. They are the embodiment of the natural world's untamed beauty and its unyielding strength. To walk these lands is to step into a world where every shadow might hold a story, every sound could be the voice of something ancient and powerful. And so, the land itself becomes alive, its features intertwined with the creatures that call it home. The forests whisper, the mountains roar, the rivers pulse with life, and the caves hold their breath, as if the earth itself is guarding something too precious to reveal fully. Each step taken in these places is a step closer to understanding, but also a step closer to being seen, by something older, something that has always been watching. In the beginning, there was nothing but an endless, formless void. Darkness stretched out in every direction, silent and boundless. From this primordial chaos, a pulse arose, a tremor so faint it might have been mistaken for nothing at all. But it was the first heartbeat of existence, the first ripple in an ocean of stillness. From this vibration came creation, and with it, something that would linger in the shadows of the world forever, the monsters. In Hindu cosmology, the universe did not come into being gently. It was born in a clash of energies, forces colliding and intertwining, light and darkness, chaos and order, creation and destruction. In this cosmic dance, the gods and Asuras emerged. The gods, radiant beings of light and balance, took their place as protectors of Dharma, the universal law. But the Asuras, born of the same primordial chaos, stood as their opposites, beings of ambition, desire, and rebellion. Neither wholly good nor evil, they embodied the raw, untamed power of existence itself. The first monsters were not accidents. They were forged in the fires of cosmic struggle, created to embody the extremes of existence. From Brahma's mind came beings that reflected his intent, his thoughts weaving the fabric of life. But not all thoughts are pure, and from his doubts, his fears, and his anger, monstrous forms were born. These creatures were chaos given shape, walking reminders of the delicate balance between creation and destruction. As the cosmic ocean churned in the Samudra Manthan, a spectacle of unimaginable power unfolded. Gods and Asuras, their strength combined, pulled at the great serpent Vasuki, whose coils churned the waters of existence. From this cosmic cauldron rose treasures and horrors alike. The hala hala, a poison so potent it could destroy all of creation, spilled forth, staining the very air with its venomous breath. This poison, consumed by Shiva to save the universe, left its mark not just on his throat but on the fabric of reality itself. It is said that some monsters trace their origins back to this poison. The Nagas, serpents of immeasurable wisdom and wrath, are thought to carry the essence of this chaos within them. Their jeweled hoods and shimmering scales are beautiful, but their bite can bring death as swiftly as the hala hala once threatened to. Then there are the Rakshasas, born from Brahma's breath. In the stillness of creation, when the world was new and unformed, they rose as shadows of his exhalation, dark and fearsome. With fangs that gleamed like knives and eyes that burned with fire, they were chaos unleashed. Yet they were not born evil, they were born to remind the gods, and humanity, of the darkness that exists within. Even Vishnu, the preserver of the universe, had his hand in the creation of monsters. In his avatar as Narasimha, half man and half lion, he tore through the Asura king Hiranyakashipu with ferocity unmatched. Narasimha was a protector, but his form, a fusion of man and beast, was monstrous, a reminder that divinity itself could blur the line between savior and terror. And what of the demons of the night, the Pishachas? They are said to be the offspring of Crota, the spirit of anger. Created in moments of divine fury, they took on the shapes of nightmares, gnarled, twisted, and grotesque. These beings were neither entirely physical nor entirely spirit, lingering in the shadows between life and death. Their presence is a constant whisper of unease, a shadow at the edge of one's vision, a reminder that anger, left unchecked, can birth horrors beyond imagination. In the Himalayan peaks, where the air is so thin it feels as though the heavens themselves press down upon the earth, ancient texts whisper of the Buddhas. These wandering spirits, born of those who died untimely or violent deaths, are tied to the unresolved chaos of their mortal lives. Their haunting cries echo through the valleys, carried by the winds that seem to howl with grief. Every monster in Hindu mythology has a purpose, a role in the cosmic balance. Some are born of divine anger, like the Mahishasura, a demon buffalo whose defeat by Durga is celebrated every year. His creation was a testament to unchecked desire and arrogance, his fall a lesson in the triumph of Dharma over chaos. Even Shiva's companions, the Ganas, are said to be monstrous in appearance. Wild-eyed and fierce, they serve as a reminder that devotion can come in forms that defy beauty, that even the most terrifying can find purpose in divine will. These monsters are not mere antagonists in the cosmic story, they are born from the same forces that created the gods themselves. They are not evil for the sake of being evil. They are the fire that burns too hot, the ocean wave that crashes too fiercely. They are reflections of the chaos that birthed the universe, and they remind us that without chaos, there can be no order, no creation, no life. The primordial chaos, the swirling, endless void that existed before the universe, never truly vanished. It lingers, woven into the fabric of the world, manifesting in the monsters that stalk its shadows. The Nagas coiling in the rivers, the Rakshasas prowling the forests, the Buddhas crying out in the mountains, all are echoes of that original, unshaped energy. They are the dark threads in the tapestry of existence, giving depth and contrast to the light. Even now, the stories tell of new monsters, born of human actions that disturb the natural order. The spirits of rivers that rage against pollution, the forests haunted by creatures angry at their destruction, these modern monsters are no less tied to the cosmic chaos than their ancient predecessors. They, too, are a reminder of balance, of respect for the forces that gave birth to the world. In the vastness of existence, where the gods walk and the Asuras rebel, the monsters stand as the raw, untamed essence of creation. They are not merely beings to be feared, they are the pulse of the universe itself, a reminder of its birth in chaos and its enduring need for balance. The stars may shine brightly, but the shadows between them carry stories that are just as powerful, just as eternal. The wind howled through the trees, twisting their branches into shapes that seemed almost alive. Leaves rustled in frantic whispers, warning of something unseen. The ground trembled faintly beneath bare feet, and the air grew heavy, thick with anticipation. In moments like these, the line between what is natural and what is otherworldly feels as fragile as a thread, ready to snap at any moment. Some say the monstrous resides in the heart of nature itself, that it breathes in the roar of a thunderstorm or the crash of ocean waves. Others insist it lurks beyond the veil, an unseen presence watching from the shadows of the supernatural. Perhaps the truth lies in the way the two are inseparably entwined, one feeding the other, blurring boundaries until the natural becomes terrifying and the supernatural feels all too real. The earth itself holds its share of monsters. In the forests, ancient banyan trees twist their roots into grotesque shapes, sprawling like the limbs of some giant, slumbering beast. When the monsoon winds tear through these groves, the rustling leaves sound like whispers, or perhaps something worse, voices that don't belong to human throats. Beneath the earth, where no light has ever reached, it is said the Rakshaganas dwell. Their growls are not imaginary, they are the groaning of tectonic plates shifting, the pulse of the living planet. In the skies, storms gather with a fury that seems alive. Lightning splits the heavens, and the thunder that follows is more than just a rumble. It feels personal, like the growl of a god or a Rakshasa angered by human arrogance. Villagers in remote regions speak of Vayusana, the great wind spirits, said to control the storms. When a gale uproots trees and scatters crops, they whisper prayers, hoping the spirits will spare their homes. The mountains, those ancient sentinels of the earth, are no strangers to monstrosity. Their peaks scrape the heavens, their valleys plunge into darkness, and their slopes conceal more than just snow and rock. Avalanches roar like the voices of angered gods, and the sound echoes for miles, relentless and unyielding. In the Himalayas, the Yeti becomes a figure not of supernatural dread but of nature's untamed force. Massive footprints pressed into the snow are a reminder of the wildness that cannot be tamed, a force both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Yet there is another kind of monster, one that exists beyond what the senses can grasp. The supernatural entities that haunt these lands do not follow the rules of the natural world. The Churel, with her backward feet and haunting wails, is said to roam graveyards and desolate fields. She doesn't simply represent death, she carries with her betrayal, sorrow, and revenge. Her presence is not tied to the weather or the land, it lingers in the space between, where the living and the dead are not fully separate. Then there are the Vetalas, beings who take possession of corpses, twisting them into vessels for their restless spirits. They are not bound by the laws of the physical world. When a Vetala rises, the very air feels wrong, thick, heavy, and stifling. It isn't the wind or the rain that causes your hair to stand on end, it's the sense that you're being watched by eyes you cannot see. Rivers, too, carry this duality. They are lifeblood and destroyer, their currents both nourishing and merciless. The Ganges, revered as a goddess, is also home to the Nagas, serpentine beings whose power is both natural and divine. When a fisherman vanishes in the river's depths, was it the pull of the current or the wrath of an angered Naga? The answer remains suspended, like the river itself, flowing between the physical and the spiritual. Even the desert is not free from this divide. The shifting sands seem endless, their beauty hiding dangers that defy explanation. Beneath the scorching sun, mirages dance and shimmer, luring travelers into despair. Some say these are natural illusions, tricks of light and heat. But others whisper of the spirits that wander the dunes, calling out in voices that sound eerily familiar. The Churel, they say, walks here too, her cries mingling with the desert wind. In the supernatural, time and space bend. The Pishachas, with their twisted forms, appear and vanish at will, haunting places where violence and despair linger. Their presence feels like an infection, a sickness spreading through the air. Unlike the roar of a storm or the growl of an earthquake, their terror is silent, creeping into the mind like a shadow too faint to see. In every corner of the world, nature asserts its power, reminding humanity of its fragility. But the supernatural carries an added weight, a defiance of logic, a breaking of the rules that govern the natural order. When a flood tears through a village, it is nature's fury. But when a single home remains untouched while all others are washed away, it feels like something more. Both kinds of monsters, those of nature and those of the supernatural, serve as mirrors to human fears. The natural terrors remind us of forces beyond our control, the primal power of the earth itself. The supernatural ones tap into something deeper, the fear of the unknown, the feeling that there is more to the world than what we can see and touch. Yet there are moments when the two converge. When a volcano erupts, its molten fury destroying everything in its path, some say it is the breath of a Rakshasa rising from the earth's core. When the forest grows unnaturally still, animals falling silent as if in reverence or fear, it feels as though something otherworldly has entered the natural realm. The boundary between these two faces of terror is not a wall but a thread, weaving through stories and beliefs. In one moment, the earth itself roars to life, in the next, the supernatural steps into view, unbound by the rules of the physical world. Together, they remind us that the world is vast, powerful, and filled with mysteries that defy explanation. And whether we walk through forests, climb mountains, or sit under the open sky, the monstrous may always be watching, sometimes in the growl of thunder, and sometimes in the silent, unseen eyes of the unknown. The air grows dense, the scent of damp earth mingling with something sharper, more ancient. Beneath the canopy of the forest, where sunlight filters through in trembling fragments, the ground seems to pulse with a quiet, unseen energy. A stream winds its way between the roots of ancient trees, its waters shimmering unnaturally in the dim light. Somewhere in the stillness, a faint hissing sound rises, a whisper or a warning. The Nagas are here. They are not merely serpents, they are beings that carry the weight of worlds within their coils. Their scaled forms glisten with hues that shift like the surface of a pearl, shimmering with a beauty that belies their ferocity. Their eyes, unblinking and hypnotic, hold the wisdom of ages past, but they also burn with an intensity that speaks of power, raw, untamed, and unrelenting. It is said that the Nagas dwell in realms unseen, hidden beneath the earth's surface and beneath the river's currents. These underworld domains are called Vetala, places of both beauty and terror. The waters here are not ordinary, they shimmer like liquid moonlight, and the walls of their caverns glisten with gems that seem to pulse with life. But the beauty of Vetala is deceptive. It is a realm guarded fiercely, its boundaries patrolled by the Naga kings, each coil of their massive bodies a promise of both protection and destruction. Vasuki, the great serpent king, is a name whispered with reverence and fear. It was his colossal form that wrapped itself around Mount Mandara during the churning of the cosmic ocean, his body serving as the rope that the gods and Asuras pulled with desperate force. The ocean gave birth to nectar and poison, life and death. Vasuki bore the weight of both, his strength the axis on which the universe balanced. To this day, his name carries the echo of that moment, the reminder that even those who serve must wield power beyond comprehension. Ananta, another Naga king, is said to hold the entire cosmos upon his countless hoods. Coiled in endless loops, he forms the very foundation of existence, his presence so vast it defies human understanding. It is on his body that Vishnu reclines, the god of preservation resting upon the infinite serpent as the universe unfolds. In Ananta, one sees the ultimate paradox, a being that holds the world together but could destroy it with a single, monstrous movement. The Nagas are not bound by the simplicity of good or evil. They are protectors of sacred rivers, their bodies flowing through the currents like living vessels of divine energy. To see a Naga basking on the riverbank, its form glistening with sunlight, is to witness a guardian in its element. The rivers of India owe much to the Nagas, whose presence ensures their purity and vitality. But their wrath, when provoked, is as unrelenting as the floodwaters that rise without warning. Legends speak of Rakshasa, a Naga king whose name is synonymous with vengeance. His fangs dripped with venom that could kill not just a man but an entire kingdom. When the great king Parikshit insulted the Nagas, it was Rakshasa who took vengeance, his bite delivering a death that reverberated through the annals of time. Rakshasa is not a creature of mindless destruction, he is a reminder of the cost of disrespect, of the balance that must be maintained between humanity and the forces it seeks to control. But for all their terror, the Nagas are also beings of unparalleled wisdom. They guard treasures both material and spiritual, their realms filled with secrets that few dare to seek. The Naga kings are said to possess mantras of immense power, their knowledge a gift to those deemed worthy. In the Mahabharata, the sage Astika was born of a Naga mother, his wisdom bridging the worlds of humans and serpents. It was Astika who saved the Nagas from annihilation during the serpent sacrifice, his voice rising above the flames to remind humanity of the sanctity of these ancient beings. The Nagas' duality is their essence. As protectors, they shield what is sacred, the rivers, the earth, the cosmic order itself. But as predators, they strike with precision, their venom coursing through the veins of those who dare disrupt the balance. Their presence is a constant reminder of the thin line between reverence and fear, between harmony and chaos. In the shadows of temples, where stone carvings of coiled serpents grace the walls, offerings of milk and flowers are made. The faithful pour their devotion into these symbols, knowing that the Nagas' favor brings blessings, while their anger can summon droughts or floods. To worship a Naga is to acknowledge a power that transcends comprehension, a force that can nurture as easily as it can destroy. The rivers continue to flow, their waters carrying whispers of serpentine forms gliding beneath the surface. The earth breathes, its pulse steady, as if cradled by the coils of a being far older than humanity's memory. The Nagas remain, their presence woven into the fabric of existence itself. They are guardians and destroyers, symbols of the balance that holds the world together, and the chaos that waits to be unleashed. The night was eerily still, the kind of stillness that tightens the chest and quickens the breath. A faint rustle in the distance, the snapping of a twig, the sound of heavy breathing just beyond sight, signs that something, or someone, was out there. The moonlight struggled to pierce the dense canopy of the forest, its silvery glow revealing nothing but shadows. But within those shadows, eyes glinted, hungry, unblinking, and cruel. Rakshasas were never creatures of subtlety. Their presence was overwhelming, a mixture of raw power and dark intent that seeped into the air around them. Their forms were grotesque, their fanged mouths wide enough to devour a man whole. Yet, for all their monstrous appearance, it was their intelligence, their cunning, that made them truly terrifying. They weren't beasts, they were something worse, a twisted reflection of humanity's darkest traits. The stories of the Rakshasas are soaked in blood and shadow. In the Ramayana, they are warriors and cannibals, sorcerers and tormentors. Ravana, the most legendary among them, was no ordinary demon. He was a scholar, a musician, and a king who ruled over the golden city of Lanka. Yet for all his grandeur, his hunger for power consumed him. His 10 heads symbolized not just his intelligence but his insatiable desires, an unquenchable thirst for dominance, knowledge, and revenge. When Ravana abducted Sita, it wasn't just an act of defiance against Rama, the avatar of Vishnu. It was an assertion of his belief that he was above gods and men, that his power was unmatched. His voice, deep and resonant, could command legions, but it was the silence of his moments of calculation that made him most dangerous. His city, Lanka, gleamed with unimaginable wealth, but beneath its golden exterior lay a foundation of fear and cruelty. The forests of Dandakaranya held Rakshasas of a different kind. Kara and Dashana, Ravana's kin, prowled these woods with their hordes, feeding on human flesh and leaving destruction in their wake. They were forces of chaos, their every action driven by bloodlust and hatred. Their battles with Rama were more than clashes of arms, they were collisions of morality and savagery, of dharma and adharma. Yet not all Rakshasas were creatures of unrelenting evil. Hidimba, a Rakshasa from the Mahabharata, stands apart. When her brother, Hidim, sought to kill the Pandavas, she chose a different path. She fell in love with Bhima, the strongest of the Pandavas, drawn to his courage and strength. Her transformation from a fearsome demoness to a devoted wife and mother to Gatotkacha, their mighty son, shows the complexity of the Rakshasas. They were not mere villains, they were beings with emotions, desires, and the capacity for change. But Hidim, her brother, was a different story. Towering and ferocious, he stalked the forest like a predator, his red eyes burning with the fire of hunger. His massive form seemed to absorb the darkness around him, his growls reverberating through the trees like the warning of an impending storm. When Bhima faced him, it wasn't just a battle of strength, but a clash of wills, man against monster, civilization against primal fury. The earth shook beneath their blows, and when Hidim fell, his roar echoed like the final cry of the forest itself. Rakshasas were shapeshifters, masters of illusion. They could appear as beautiful women, luring travelers into their traps, or as trusted friends, betraying them when they least expected it. In their true forms, they were monstrous, huge, with claws like daggers and teeth that could tear through bone. Their laughter was cruel, a sound that froze the blood and left no doubt about their intent. One of the most chilling stories is that of Kumbhakarna, Ravana's brother. A giant of unimaginable size, his hunger was legendary. He would sleep for months, only to wake and consume everything in his path, animals, men, even entire armies. But Kumbhakarna was not without a strange sense of loyalty. When Ravana called him to battle, he rose from his slumber, knowing he marched toward his death. His loyalty to his brother was unshaken, even as he questioned Ravana's choices. In his final moments, he fought with a ferocity that shook the heavens, a reminder that even monsters could possess honor. The forests, mountains, and caves of ancient India whispered with tales of the Rakshasas. They were guardians of treasures, protectors of sacred spaces, and yet they were also destroyers, their presence a constant threat. They thrived in the wild places, where human civilization hesitated to tread, their howls and roars carrying through the night like a warning to stay away. Rakshasas were more than physical threats, they were embodiments of chaos and fear. They represented the unknown, the dangers lurking just beyond the light of the fire. They were reminders of humanity's fragility, of the thin line between order and anarchy. Yet, in their cunning and power, they also reflected human ambition and the cost of succumbing to it. Even now, their stories linger, their shadows stretching long across the sands of time. They are in the rustling of the leaves, the howl of the wind, the stillness of the night. They are the monsters that haunt the edges of our imagination, waiting, always waiting, to remind us of the darkness that dwells within and without. The fire in the cremation ground flickered, casting long, writhing shadows across the barren landscape. Ashes swirled in the air, carried by an unseen force, and the scent of burning flesh lingered heavily. A low, mournful wind wound its way through the pyres, and for a moment, all fell silent. Then came the sound, an eerie, guttural whisper, not quite human, not entirely of this world. The Pishachas had arrived. These beings are not bound by flesh and bone, but their presence is undeniable, palpable in the chill that seeps into the skin and the unshakable feeling of being watched. Their forms shift and twist, grotesque and shadowy, faces contorted in eternal agony. They skulk in the darkness, their hollow, glowing eyes scanning the living with an insatiable hunger. It's said they feed not only on flesh, but on the essence of those unfortunate enough to encounter them, draining vitality, stealing sanity. Born of malevolence and chaos, Pishachas are believed to have emerged from the darkest corners of existence, spawned by curses or the hatred of those who died unfulfilled or in rage. Their connection to death is inescapable. They haunt cremation grounds, places where life's fragility is laid bare, where the boundary between the living and the dead is paper-thin. Among the smoldering remains, they crouch and slither, their long, clawed fingers sifting through ashes, seeking remnants of flesh or spirit to devour. In the stillness of the night, when the last mourner has left, they rise. They thrive in solitude, their whispers filling the void left by grieving families. Those who wander too close to these places speak of an oppressive heaviness, a sense of being suffocated by invisible hands. They claim to hear voices, not their own, but echoes of thoughts they dare not speak aloud. The Pishachas are masters of deception, their voices sweet yet venomous, luring their victims deeper into despair. Legends speak of their insidious power to invade the mind. They slip into thoughts unbidden, planting seeds of doubt, fear, and rage. A person touched by a Pishacha might become a shadow of themselves, lost in paranoia, consumed by anger, or driven to acts of unthinkable cruelty. These spirits do not merely feed, they corrupt, turning the living into tools of their dark will. But it is their physical presence that haunts the most vivid nightmares. Stories tell of their gaunt, skeletal bodies, their skin stretched tightly over jagged bones, blackened and rotting as if decaying while alive. Their mouths are wide, filled with sharp, uneven teeth, forever gnashing and grinding as if eager for their next feast. When they move, it is with a sickening fluidity, as though their joints bend in ways they shouldn't. One tale recounts a lone traveler passing through a forest near a cremation ground. The man was warned to stay clear, but he pressed on, confident in his courage. As the moon rose, he noticed a strange figure hunched over a smoldering pyre. Its back was to him, its long limbs moving erratically, scraping at the charred wood. Thinking it a scavenger, he called out, his voice firm but curious. The figure froze. Slowly, it turned its head, not its body, just its head, its neck twisting unnaturally to reveal a face that was both human and something far worse. Its eyes glowed like dying embers, its mouth stretched in a grin that seemed to tear its face apart. The man's scream echoed through the forest, but no one came. When his body was found days later, his face was locked in an expression of sheer terror, his eyes wide and bloodshot, as though he had seen something no mortal should. Not all encounters end in death. Some survive, but they carry scars far deeper than the physical. They speak of whispers that never fade, of shadows that follow them even in daylight. Their minds remain fractured, as though the Pishachas' touch lingers, a stain that no prayer or ritual can erase. The Brahmins, the keepers of sacred knowledge, tell of rituals to ward off these spirits, offerings of food, mantras chanted with unwavering precision, and fires lit with sacred wood. Yet even these are no guarantees. The Pishachas are cunning, capable of bending even the most potent rituals to their will. Despite their terror, there is a strange, tragic beauty to the stories of Pishachas. They are not evil by choice, but by creation, shaped by forces beyond their control. Some say they are the souls of those wronged in life, denied peace in death, their existence a constant torment. They are driven by hunger, but also by a longing for release, a release that never comes. And so they remain, tethered to the places where life ends, their presence a grim reminder of the fragility of the soul. They are the whispers in the ashes, the shadows in the flames, the chill that clings to the air long after the fire has gone out. The Pishachas do not leave, they endure, haunting the boundaries of existence, waiting for the next unwitting soul to stray too close. The surface of the water shimmered under the light of the rising sun, calm and inviting. But beneath that mirror-like calmness, something ancient stirred. The river's depths were more than just a home for fish and plants. They were a domain, vast and unyielding, where a creature unlike any other ruled. Its presence was unseen, but its influence was everywhere. The stillness wasn't peace, it was the hush before a predator's strike. Makara was no ordinary beast. It defied classification, an amalgamation of forms, a being both terrifying and majestic. With the body of a fish, the jaws of a crocodile, and the tail of a coiled serpent, it moved with grace that belied its immense power. Its scales glimmered with an otherworldly sheen, reflecting blues and greens that seemed to pulse like living jewels. But its eyes, dark and depthless, spoke of ancient wisdom and unrelenting hunger. Legends say that Makara was not merely a creature of the rivers and seas, but a guardian of the boundaries between worlds. It thrived where the land kissed the water, patrolling these thresholds with an unwavering vigilance. Sailors and fishermen whispered of its shadow slipping silently beneath their boats, a fleeting glimpse of its enormous form enough to still their hearts. For those who offended the waters or disturbed its sanctity, Makara's wrath was swift and merciless. Boats overturned without warning, dragged into the depths by unseen forces. Survivors were rare, and those who lived to tell the tale spoke of jaws that could crush stone and a tail that could sweep away entire waves. Yet Makara was not merely a monster. It was also a sacred being, revered and feared in equal measure. The gods themselves chose it as a companion, a Vahana. Varuna, the god of the oceans, rode upon its back, his regal form a striking contrast to the wild, untamed power of the beast beneath him. The sight of Varuna atop Makara was a symbol of balance, a reminder that even the fiercest forces of nature could be wielded for order and justice. The hymns and carvings dedicated to Makara speak of its dual nature. As a Vahana, it carried Varuna across the endless expanse of water, a steady and loyal servant of divine will. But as a guardian of the deep, it was a force of chaos, unpredictable and untouchable. This duality made it a creature of fascination, a being that embodied the paradoxes of life itself, destruction and creation, savagery and serenity. Makara's influence extended beyond the waters. Its image was carved into temple gates, a silent protector against evil forces. It adorned the bows of ships, a talisman for safe passage through treacherous seas. Its presence was a warning and a blessing, a reminder of the vast powers that lay beneath the surface, hidden yet ever present. There are tales of those who dared to challenge Makara, believing themselves invincible against its might. One such story speaks of a prince whose arrogance blinded him to the dangers of the sea. He laughed at the warnings of the fishermen, scoffing at their tales of a beast that ruled the waters. On a moonless night, he set sail with his entourage, determined to prove his dominance over the untamed waves. The night was silent, the waters eerily calm as the prince's boat cut through the darkness. But then it came, a sudden shift in the water, a ripple that grew into a surge. The boat rocked violently, and the prince's laughter turned to screams. From the depths emerged a shadow, massive and terrifying, its jaws opening wide to reveal rows of jagged teeth. The prince's cries were swallowed by the roar of the waves as makara struck, a blur of power and ferocity. When dawn broke, the sea was calm once more, the prince's boat reduced to splinters. But not all interactions with makara ended in tragedy. There are stories of those who approached the waters with humility and reverence, who sang praises to the creature before setting sail. For them, makara became a protector, its unseen presence guiding their vessels safely through the most dangerous waters. It was said that offerings of milk and flowers left at the riverbanks could appease the beast, ensuring its favor. The rivers and seas were not merely pathways or sources of sustenance, they were alive, sentient, and sacred. And at the heart of their mystique was makara, the keeper of their secrets, the enforcer of their laws. To the wise, it was a symbol of respect for nature's power, a reminder that the waters, while life-giving, were not to be taken for granted. Even now, the stories linger in the ripples of the rivers and the crashing of the waves. Makara's legend endures, a timeless tale of strength and reverence. It is a whisper in the waters, a shadow beneath the surface, a presence that commands awe and fear in equal measure. The sky darkened in an instant, clouds gathering like an army summoned to war. A low rumble shook the ground, not thunder, but something deeper, more primal. The trees swayed violently, their branches snapping as if they were brittle twigs. The air itself seemed alive, swirling, pressing down, pulling up, as if caught in the grip of an invisible giant. Then, from the chaos, a piercing howl echoed, a sound not of this world, a cry that carried the fury of tempests and the sorrow of untamed destruction. They are the Bhumi-dagas, the wind demons, forces of nature and devastation, and their arrival is never quiet. Born of the untamed air and shaped by fury, they embody the feral strength of storms. These beings are not seen in their entirety, for their forms are woven into the wind itself, but their presence is undeniable. A glimmer of movement within the spiraling gusts, a shadow racing through the storm clouds, a pair of glowing eyes peering from the maelstrom, these are the marks of their existence. Bhumi-dagas do not simply ride the winds, they command them. With a flick of their clawed fingers or the sweep of their spectral wings, they summon hurricanes that churn the oceans, flatten villages, and scatter lives like autumn leaves. Their wrath knows no bounds, their purpose shrouded in mystery. Some say they are driven by an eternal anger, others by sorrow too heavy to bear. But all agree that they are not to be provoked. The stories of their power are etched into the collective memory of those who have lived through their rage. A fisherman once stood by the shore, his nets full, the sun bright overhead. But in the span of a heartbeat, the air turned cold, and the sky shifted to an unnatural gray. A roaring wind swept across the beach, snatching the nets from his hands and scattering them into the ocean. As he stumbled back, he saw it, a figure wreathed in swirling gusts, its eyes burning like molten fire. Before he could cry out, the wind surged forward, knocking him off his feet and stealing the breath from his lungs. When the storm cleared, the village was in ruins. Trees were uprooted, houses shattered into fragments, and the ocean itself had carved new paths through the land. The fisherman survived, but he never returned to the shore. He spoke of the demon in the wind, its wrath unstoppable, its gaze searing into his soul. Some believe that Bhumi-dagas are more than destroyers, they are guardians of balance. Their storms cleanse what is stagnant, forcing renewal upon a world that resists change. But their methods are harsh, their lessons brutal. A kingdom once flourished on the banks of a great river, its palaces gleaming in the sunlight, its people basking in prosperity. But pride led to neglect, and the river grew polluted, its waters choked with waste. The skies darkened one fateful day, and the winds came, not gentle breezes, but violent gales that tore through the city with merciless precision. Amid the chaos, some claimed to see figures dancing within the storm, elongated forms with wings that stretched like thunderclouds, their limbs moving in a rhythm that matched the howling winds. They danced through the destruction, their movements fluid and wild, their cries resonating with the roar of the tempest. When the storm passed, the river flowed clean again, but the kingdom was no more. Bhumi-dagas are not bound by mortal morality. Their actions may seem cruel, but they follow laws older than time itself. They answer to no gods, yet their presence is often seen as divine punishment or intervention. Temples have been built to honor them, rituals performed to placate their fury. Priests chant mantras to still the winds, offering incense and prayers to the unseen beings that hold the power to turn a clear day into a living nightmare. But there are tales of those who dared to face the wind demons and lived to tell the tale. A young boy, orphaned by a storm that destroyed his village, stood at the heart of a raging cyclone. His small frame was battered by the wind, his voice almost lost in the deafening roar. Yet he sang, a haunting melody taught by his grandmother, a song said to calm the spirits of the air. The wind slowed, the storm clouds parted, and for a fleeting moment, he saw them. They hovered in the dissipating winds, their forms both beautiful and terrifying, their faces unreadable masks of swirling air and light. They did not speak, but he felt their gaze, heavy and unrelenting, before they dissolved into the fading breeze. Vega remind the living of their fragility, their smallness in the face of nature's power. They are the breath of chaos, the hands that tear down so the world can rebuild. To witness them is to understand that the air, so often taken for granted, holds a power that can snuff out life as easily as it sustains it. They are not merely storms, they are the will of the wind, the fury of the skies, the embodiment of destruction and renewal. And when they howl, the world holds its breath. The flame flickered, its light dancing across the walls of the ancient temple. For a moment, it seemed alive, pulsing, growing, shrinking, as if breathing in rhythm with the silent night. Then it surged, sudden and fierce, casting shadows that moved like specters across the stone carvings. A heat filled the air, thick and oppressive, carrying with it a low, guttural growl that came not from any beast of the earth, but from the flame itself. The fire was no longer just fire. It was watching. Agni Rakshasas, the fire wielders, are not creatures of this world but of something far older, far more untamed. They are the spirits of flame, embodiments of destruction and creation. Their presence is marked by a searing heat that suffocates and a light so bright it blinds. Yet, within their flames lies a duality, a force that can warm and protect, or consume and obliterate. The stories of Agni Rakshasas are as old as fire itself. It is said that when the first spark leaped into existence, it brought with it a guardian, a being formed of the same untamed energy. This guardian, born of flame, could not be controlled or contained. It roared with the ferocity of a wildfire, devouring forests, villages, and lives without distinction. Yet it also burned away the darkness, providing light and warmth to the shivering souls who cowered in its glow. In the ancient texts, Agni Rakshasas are described as towering figures wreathed in flame, their eyes burning with an intensity that could melt stone. Their voices are like the crackling of 1,000 fires, a cacophony of destruction and renewal. They carry within them the fury of a volcano and the warmth of a hearth, the power to reduce worlds to ash and the grace to nurture new life from the embers. One tale speaks of a village nestled in the heart of a dense forest. The villagers revered fire, offering prayers and sacrifices to keep the flames at bay. But one fateful summer, a drought parched the land, and the forest turned into a tinderbox. It was then that an Agni Rakshasa appeared, its form towering above the tallest trees, its flames licking the sky. The villagers watched in terror as it advanced, the ground scorching beneath its feet. But among them was a young girl who stepped forward, her small hands holding a bowl of milk. She walked toward the raging fire, her steps unwavering despite the blistering heat. The flames recoiled at her approach, the Agni Rakshas's burning eyes fixed on her. She knelt before it, offering the milk with a prayer for mercy. For a moment, the world stood still. Then, the Rakshasa reached out, its fiery hand transforming the milk into a golden light that enveloped the village. The drought ended, rain fell, and the forest grew green once more. But the villagers knew better than to forget. They built a shrine to the fire spirit, understanding that its mercy was not guaranteed, its wrath always a breath away. Agni Rakshasas are not bound by human concepts of good and evil. Their flames care nothing for morality. They burn because they must, because it is their nature. Yet there are those who have sought to wield their power. Sorcerers and warriors have called upon these beings, hoping to command the flames to serve their own ends. One such tale tells of a king whose greed knew no bounds. He summoned an Agni Rakshasa to his court, promising it sacrifices in exchange for its loyalty. The Rakshasa appeared, its presence filling the grand hall with unbearable heat. The king demanded that it set his enemies' lands ablaze, that it burn away all who opposed him. The Rakshasa obeyed, its flames consuming armies, villages, and kingdoms. But as the fire spread, they grew uncontrollable. The Rakshasa turned its gaze to the king, its eyes blazing with a fury he could not comprehend. "You sought to wield me," it said, its voice a roar that shook the palace walls. "But fire serves none." The palace was reduced to ash, the king's empire swallowed by the very flames he had unleashed. The Rakshasa vanished, leaving behind a smoldering wasteland as a warning to those who would seek to control the uncontrollable. Yet not all encounters with Agni Rakshasas end in devastation. There are stories of those who have found harmony with the fire spirits, who have learned to respect their power. A blacksmith in a small village is said to have forged blades with the blessing of an Agni Rakshasa. His forge burned with a fire that never dimmed, the metal shaped by hands guided by the spirit of flame. The blades he crafted were unbreakable, their edges sharp enough to cut through the hardest steel. But even he knew that the fire was not his to command. He tended it with care, feeding it offerings of fragrant wood and whispered prayers. And when the time came for his final creation, he extinguished the flames, letting the Rakshasa return to its eternal dance among the stars. The Agni Rakshasas remind us of the power of fire, a force that has shaped humanity's journey, a tool that can both save and destroy. They are a reflection of our own nature, our capacity for creation and devastation. To see an Agni Rakshasa is to understand the fragility of control, the thin line between warmth and incineration. They are the flicker of a candle and the roar of an inferno, the guardians of a force that is both a gift and a curse. The ground trembled, not with the measured rhythm of an earthquake, but with a pulse, steady and deliberate, as though the earth itself were alive and moving. Ancient stones cracked and shifted, revealing patterns too intricate to be chance. The villagers stood frozen, their gaze fixed on the distant hills. Slowly, impossibly, the hills began to rise, their shapes transforming into colossal figures. These were no mere mountains, they were Bhumi-dagas, the earthbound giants, creatures as ancient as the land itself. In the myths whispered around fires and etched into temple walls, the Bhumi-dagas are described as massive beings born from the very bones of the earth. Their forms are rugged and raw, like the cliffs and crags they resemble. Some say their bodies are made of soil and rock, their veins coursing with molten lava. Others believe they are guardians of the earth's secrets, protectors of treasures hidden beneath the surface. Yet, their presence is not always benign. These giants are forces of nature, shaping the land with their colossal movements, often leaving devastation in their wake. One story tells of a time when a Bhumi-daga slumbered beneath a great plain. For centuries, the land above remained fertile, feeding generations of farmers. But one summer, a greedy king ordered his men to dig deep into the earth in search of gold rumored to be buried there. Their shovels pierced deeper and deeper until the ground itself roared in anger. The Bhumi-daga awoke, its massive form erupting from the soil. It rose to its full height, towering over the landscape, its eyes glowing like molten embers. With a single step, it crushed the king's palace, reclaiming the earth that had been torn apart. Not all Bhumi-dagas are destroyers. Some legends speak of them as creators, sculpting the very land upon which we live. A tale from the Himalayan valleys tells of a Bhumi-daga who, moved by the beauty of the mountains, decided to carve rivers to flow through them. Using its enormous hands, the giant scooped out valleys and guided streams, creating pathways for water to nourish the land. Villages flourished along these rivers, their people offering prayers to the unseen giant who had shaped their world. But even creators can become wrathful when their work is threatened. Another tale recounts how a Bhumi-daga, enraged by a war that desecrated the forests it had nurtured, unleashed its fury. It stomped the ground with such force that the land cracked and split, swallowing entire armies. The battlefield became a vast canyon, a scar on the earth that served as a reminder of the giant's power and the cost of human arrogance. Bhumi-dagas are said to communicate through the language of the earth. Their voices are the groaning of tectonic plates, the rumble of distant thunder, the whisper of wind through the caves. When they walk, the ground shakes, and when they rest, the land settles into peace. To hear the voice of a Bhumi-daga is to feel the immense weight of the world, to sense the timelessness of the soil beneath your feet. There is a legend from the deserts of Rajasthan about a Bhumi-daga that guarded an ancient well. The well was said to hold water so pure it could cure any ailment. But the daga allowed only those with pure hearts to drink from it. One day, a band of robbers approached, hoping to steal the water and sell it to the highest bidder. As they drew near, the sand began to shift, rising into a towering figure. The daga's eyes burned like the midday sun as it raised its hand and summoned a storm. The winds howled, the sand swirled, and when it all settled, the robbers were gone, buried beneath the dunes. Some say the Bhumi-dagas are the earth's way of maintaining balance. When the land is exploited, when forests are razed, and mountains are mined, these giants rise to remind humanity of its place. Yet, they are not without compassion. Stories tell of Bhumi-dagas who have guided lost travelers, their massive forms appearing on the horizon to lead the way. Others speak of farmers who, in times of drought, have found their barren fields replenished overnight, the footprints of a giant marking the soil. In the Mahabharata, there are mentions of colossal beings who fought alongside gods and mortals. Some scholars believe these references could be to Bhumi-dagas, their immense strength turning the tide of battles. Yet, their allegiance was never guaranteed. These giants were not bound by loyalty to any one cause or deity. They acted according to their own sense of balance, their movements slow but deliberate, their decisions as unyielding as the mountains they resembled. The Bhumi-dagas embody the immense power of the earth, a power that can nurture and sustain but also destroy without warning. They are a reminder of humanity's insignificance in the face of nature's vastness. To see a Bhumi-daga rise from the land is to witness the earth itself come alive, to feel the ground tremble with a force older than time. And yet, their stories are tinged with a sense of melancholy. These giants, bound to the earth, are solitary figures. Their lives stretch across millennia, their memories etched into the land they shape. The mountains, rivers, and valleys we see today may well be the work of Bhumi-dagas long forgotten, their forms now resting beneath the surface, waiting for the moment when they are called upon again. The snow crunched softly under the traveler's boots, each step a fragile defiance against the icy winds that screamed through the Himalayan peaks. The sun, pale and distant, cast long shadows across the desolate expanse, its light bouncing off the glaciers like shards of glass. Then, without warning, the silence of the frozen wilderness was broken by an eerie, guttural howl. It was not the wind. It was something alive. High in the Himalayas, where oxygen thins and the land feels closer to the heavens than to the earth, the air itself seems haunted. Villagers speak of a presence that watches from the ridges, massive and elusive. They call it the Yeti, the abominable snowman. It is not just a legend whispered in the warmth of a fire, it is a creature etched into the hearts of those who dwell beneath the shadow of the mountains. Its presence is as real to them as the snow that blankets their homes. The Yeti is not merely a beast, it is a specter of the mountains, its form as much a part of the landscape as the towering peaks themselves. Stories say it stands taller than the mightiest warrior, its fur white as snow or sometimes tinged with an earthy brown. Its eyes, dark and glistening, are said to pierce through the veil of storms, watching and waiting. Some claim to have seen its footprints, massive impressions in the snow, too large to be human, too deliberate to be the work of chance. Others speak of shadows that move with unnatural grace, appearing for a heartbeat before vanishing into the endless whiteness. One of the most chilling tales comes from a shepherd who ventured too far into the upper reaches of the mountains. His flock had scattered in fear, and he followed their trail to a remote ravine. There, amidst the rocks and snow, he saw a figure hunched over. It moved slowly, as if examining the ground. The shepherd froze, his breath caught in his throat. The creature turned its head, revealing a face that was neither human nor entirely animal. Its gaze locked with his for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then, with a powerful stride, it disappeared into the mist. The shepherd returned to his village trembling, his words disjointed, his face pale. "The mountain is alive," he whispered. "It watches." The Yeti's presence is not always malevolent. In some stories, it is a protector of the sacred. Monasteries tucked into the Himalayan cliffs speak of encounters with the creature. Monks recount how it has saved lost travelers, guiding them back to safety with a strange but gentle intelligence. A revered lama once spoke of a Yeti that appeared during a fierce blizzard. The creature, he said, carried him on its back through the storm to a hidden cave, where it stayed until the skies cleared. When he awoke, the Yeti was gone, leaving only a trace of warmth in the frozen air. Yet, the Yeti is also feared as a harbinger of doom. The ancient songs of the Sherpa people tell of times when the creature descended into the valleys, its roar shaking the earth, its fury unstoppable. Entire villages are said to have been abandoned in its wake, the snow stained with signs of struggle. To see the Yeti, they say, is to be marked by the mountains, for better or for worse. What makes the Yeti so haunting is its duality. It is a bridge between the human and the wild, a creature that embodies the raw power of nature but also hints at something more profound. The Himalayan peaks, with their sheer cliffs and endless horizons, are a place where the veil between the mundane and the mystical feels impossibly thin. The Yeti moves within that liminal space, neither fully of this world nor entirely beyond it. Expeditions have sought to uncover the truth of the Yeti, with footprints cast in plaster and blurry photographs brought back as evidence. But those who live in the mountains often shake their heads at such efforts. The Yeti, they say, is not meant to be captured or proven. It is not just an animal to be studied, it is a force, an embodiment of the mountain spirit, and perhaps, a reminder of humanity's smallness in the face of nature's grandeur. In the bitter cold of the Himalayas, where the line between life and death is razor-thin, the Yeti looms large as a reminder of the unknown. It is the flicker of movement in the corner of your eye, the sound that doesn't belong, the sense that you are not alone in the most desolate of places. It is the mystery of the mountains made flesh, a creature that defies logic but feels utterly real to those who have stood on the edge of its world. Even as modernity encroaches, the legend of the Yeti endures. In the glow of a digital age, its shadow remains cast over the peaks, a whisper of something ancient and untamed. Those who have been to the Himalayas say the mountains change you. They strip away your illusions, leaving you raw and humbled. And for those who believe, they say the Yeti is a part of that transformation, a guardian, a warning, a question left unanswered. The air grows thin and sharp as the path climbs higher into the Himalayan range, the silence broken only by the rhythmic crunch of boots against the ancient, weathered stones. A sense of unease whispers through the cold wind, brushing against the skin like an unseen hand. High above, the jagged peaks pierce the heavens, their shadows casting an eternal dusk over the valleys below. This is sacred ground, where mortals tread lightly, for the mountains are not empty. They are guarded. Legends speak of the Rakshasas, the fierce spirits that protect these hallowed peaks. They are not beings of flesh and bone, but of essence, ancient and indomitable. Their presence is felt in the chilling gusts that whip through narrow passes, and the shifting mists that obscure the temples perched precariously on cliff edges. It is said they do not sleep, their watch eternal, their purpose unyielding. To approach the sacred treasures or temples they guard without reverence or rite is to invite their wrath, a fury as relentless as the mountains themselves. Travelers tell of the moment when the air changes, growing heavy with an unspoken tension. There is no visible sign, no echoing roar or descending shadow, only an unmistakable awareness. It is as though the mountain itself has turned its gaze upon the intruder, weighing their intentions. Those who carry the blessings of the gods, or the purity of a pilgrim's heart, speak of a strange serenity, as though invisible hands guide them safely through the treacherous terrain. But those who come with greed in their hearts, seeking to defile the sanctity of the peaks, find themselves swallowed by the land itself, avalanches triggered without cause, storms that rise from nowhere, paths that twist and disappear. In one of the oldest tales, a group of treasure seekers climbed to a hidden temple rumored to hold untold riches. They came with tools to break the sacred seals, their hearts filled with thoughts of gold and gems. As they neared the temple, a thick fog descended, so dense it felt like a shroud. Then came the sound, a low, guttural growl that seemed to emanate from the very stones beneath their feet. One by one, the men vanished into the mist, their cries swallowed by the mountains. When the fog lifted, there was no trace of them, only the undisturbed temple standing as it had for centuries. Villagers who heard the story claimed it was the Rakshasas who had intervened, their vengeance swift and unerring. The Rakshasas are not bound to the material plane, yet they manifest in ways that are both terrifying and awe-inspiring. Some describe them as towering figures of flame and shadow, their eyes burning like molten gold. Others claim they take the form of beasts, great wolves, tigers, or eagles, their movements impossibly fluid, their power undeniable. In the oldest carvings found in Himalayan temples, the guardians are depicted as warriors, their forms blending human strength with divine ferocity. Always, they are shown standing vigilant, their weapons raised, their expressions fierce yet noble. The temples of the Himalayas, nestled amidst the clouds, are not merely places of worship. They are sanctuaries where the line between the mortal and the divine blurs. It is said that these shrines hold not only relics, but also secrets, fragments of ancient wisdom, glimpses into the eternal. To protect such treasures requires a force beyond human comprehension, and so the Rakshasas stand as sentinels, their existence a testament to the sanctity of their charge. One particularly haunting story speaks of a lone monk who climbed to a temple to seek the favor of the gods. As he approached, he saw a figure standing at the entrance, its outline shimmering like heat waves against the icy air. The monk fell to his knees, his voice trembling as he recited prayers. The figure did not speak, but a deep, resonant sound filled the air, vibrating through the stones and into the monk's very bones. He later described it as the sound of the mountain itself, a voice ancient and all-encompassing. The guardian did not harm him, but as he passed into the temple, he felt the presence lingering, a silent reminder of the power that watched over the sacred ground. The Rakshasas are not mere symbols of fear, they are embodiments of balance. They protect not only the treasures of the gods, but also the sanctity of the natural world. In the tales of the villagers, these guardians are said to punish those who harm the land, poachers, defilers of rivers, and those who destroy without thought. A hunter once recounted how he had set a trap for a snow leopard, only to find it broken the next morning, the tracks of an enormous, unidentifiable creature circling the area. That night, he dreamed of a giant figure with glowing eyes, its voice a rumble of distant thunder. "Leave," it commanded. "This land is not yours to take." He abandoned his hunt and never returned. Even in their ferocity, there is a strange beauty to the Rakshasas, a purity of purpose that mirrors the mountains they guard. The peaks are harsh, their slopes unforgiving, yet they hold a majesty that humbles all who stand before them. So too are the guardians, unyielding yet just, terrifying yet revered. They are the spirit of the Himalayas given form, a reminder that some places are meant to be untouched, their mysteries preserved for eternity. For those who tread respectfully, the guardians are silent allies, their presence felt but unseen. But for those who would defile the sacred, the Rakshasas are an implacable force, as merciless and unyielding as the avalanche that sweeps away all in its path. They are the protectors of the peaks, their watch eternal, their power a testament to the awe and reverence the Himalayas command. The Himalayan valleys are places where time seems to stand still, and the silence carries an almost sentient weight. As the sun dips behind the towering peaks, shadows stretch across the land, long and spectral. It is in this twilight hour that the stories come alive, the whispers of the Buddhas, spirits that roam the mountains, unseen yet ever present. The locals speak in hushed tones of their encounters, their eyes betraying both fear and reverence. The Buddhas are not mere phantoms, they are remnants of lives lost, memories turned restless, bound forever to the valleys and forests they once called home. They are the echoes of those who met untimely ends, wandering souls searching for closure in a world that has long forgotten them. A shepherd once told of a night spent high in the hills, tending to his flock under a pale, indifferent moon. As the hours stretched on, a strange sound drifted through the air, a soft, mournful wail that seemed to rise and fall with the wind. At first, he thought it was the call of a distant animal, but then he saw a figure. Draped in tattered white, it hovered just beyond the edge of his campfire's glow. Its face was obscured, yet he could feel its gaze pierce through him, heavy with sorrow. He closed his eyes, muttering prayers under his breath, and when he dared to look again, the figure was gone, leaving only an unnatural chill in the air. The Buddhas are said to dwell in places marked by tragedy, desolate paths where travelers have lost their way, crumbling ruins of forgotten temples, and the icy ridges where climbers have taken their final breaths. These spirits are tethered to the land, their presence a reminder of the thin veil between life and death in the unforgiving mountains. Some say they appear as shimmering lights that flicker and dance across the cliffs, luring the unsuspecting closer, only to vanish into the abyss. Others describe them as shadows that move against the wind, their forms twisting and dissolving like smoke. Not all encounters with the Buddhas are filled with terror. Some are steeped in a sorrow so profound it grips the heart and does not let go. A villager once shared a tale of her grandmother, who had lost her way in the forest as a young girl. As darkness fell, she stumbled upon an old woman sitting by a tree, her hair silver as moonlight. The woman spoke in a voice barely louder than a whisper, guiding her back to the safety of the village. It was only later that she learned no one lived in that part of the forest, and the description of the old woman matched that of someone who had died there many years before. To this day, the villagers believe it was a Buddha, its soul still tied to the land, but filled with a quiet compassion. But for every tale of kindness, there are warnings of malevolence. Some Buddhas are said to carry the anger of unfinished lives, their rage directed at those who cross their paths. Travelers who mock the spirits or desecrate sacred grounds speak of waking to find themselves lost, their surroundings unrecognizable even in familiar terrain. Others recount a suffocating presence pressing down on them, a cold weight that leaves them gasping for air, as though the spirits themselves are trying to pull them into their world. The wind is said to carry their voices, an eerie symphony that echoes through the valleys. In the stillness of the night, when even the animals fall silent, it begins, a low, keening sound that rises and falls like the cries of the grieving. Some villagers claim that if you listen too closely, you can hear your own name being called, a lure that draws you deeper into the darkness. Those who follow are rarely seen again. The Buddhas are often associated with specific places, each with its own harrowing tale. There is a glacier where climbers have reported seeing spectral figures moving silently across the ice, their footprints leaving no trace. A dense forest near a remote village is known as the Whispering Woods, where faint voices drift through the trees, speaking in a language no one can understand. And then there are the abandoned monasteries, their crumbling walls home to shadows that seem to shift and flicker in the corner of the eye. Yet, the Buddhas are not just figures of fear, they are woven into the fabric of the mountain's identity. Their stories serve as both warnings and lessons, reminders of the respect owed to the land and its history. To the villagers, they are more than ghosts, they are ancestors, guardians, and harbingers, their presence a testament to the spiritual weight of the Himalayas. A trekker once recounted his encounter with a Buddha near an ancient stupa. As he approached, he felt an overwhelming sense of unease, as though he were being watched. Suddenly, a figure appeared, a translucent form with hollow eyes that seemed to hold the weight of centuries. It raised a hand, not in aggression, but in warning. The trekker stumbled back, his heart pounding, and the figure faded into the mist. The next morning, he learned that the path he had been about to take was blocked by a deadly landslide. The Buddhas are as much a part of the Himalayas as the snow-capped peaks and rushing rivers. They are the memories of those who have come before, the spirits of a land that does not forget. Whether they appear as guides, guardians, or vengeful wraiths, their presence is a reminder of the sacredness of these valleys, a sacredness that demands respect and humility. As the first rays of dawn break over the mountains, the shadows retreat, and the Buddhas fade back into the mists. But their stories linger, etched into the hearts of those who have felt their presence. For in the Himalayas, the line between the living and the dead is as thin as the air at its highest peaks, and the spirits of the mountains are always watching. The air was heavy with the scent of rain-soaked earth, and the distant rumble of a waterfall filled the silence between the towering cliffs. Among the whispers of the wind, it was said you could hear the faint strains of music, hauntingly beautiful, yet laced with a sorrow that pierced the soul. Those who ventured too far into the hidden valleys spoke of glimpsing figures wreathed in an ethereal glow, their beauty twisted, their laughter a haunting echo. These were not mere phantoms, but beings who had once danced among the stars, Gandharvas and Apsaras cursed to wander as monsters. They were celestial creatures once, the bearers of music and grace, weaving magic with their every move. The Gandharvas were heavenly musicians, their melodies capable of summoning joy or reducing even the strongest hearts to tears. The Apsaras, with their radiant beauty and fluid dances, were embodiments of divine elegance, said to sway the minds of gods and mortals alike. But in the folds of the mountains, their stories took darker turns, tales of punishment, betrayal, and despair that left them bound to the earth, far from their celestial homes. A hermit, lost in meditation amidst the towering peaks, claimed to have seen one such figure on a stormy night. Lightning flashed, illuminating a creature of surreal beauty. Her eyes glowed like embers, her hair a cascade of shadows, and her once perfect form bore the marks of her curse, twisted limbs, jagged wings, and an aura that crackled with restrained power. She had appeared at the edge of his firelight, her voice trembling with a melody so sorrowful it froze him in place. As the storm raged, she vanished, leaving only the faint scent of jasmine and the lingering echo of her lament. The curses that bound these celestial beings were often the result of divine wrath or cruel twists of fate. An Apsara named Urvashi, known for her intoxicating allure, had once been banished for distracting a sage from his penance. The curse condemned her to wander the mortal realm, her ethereal beauty fading into a form that terrified rather than enchanted. Her laughter, once a symphony of joy, became a cackle that echoed through the valleys, sending shivers down the spines of those who heard it. The Gandharvas, too, were not spared. A proud musician, enchanted by his own abilities, had once challenged a god to a contest of skill. When his arrogance led to defeat, he was cast out of the heavens. The once harmonious notes of his vina turned discordant, a reflection of the bitterness that consumed him. Now, his ghostly figure roams the cliffs, his music a chilling warning to those who dare to trespass. These beings, though monstrous in appearance, carried their celestial essence within them, making their presence a mix of terror and tragedy. A traveler once spoke of an encounter with a Gandharv cursed to guard a hidden shrine. As he approached, the air grew heavy, and a melody filled the space around him, a melody that seemed to know his every joy, every regret. When the Gandharv appeared, his form was both majestic and grotesque, a shadow of his former self. Yet, in his eyes burned a longing for redemption, a plea for the freedom that had been denied to him for centuries. The mountains themselves seemed to echo the anguish of these fallen beings. The rustling leaves sounded like whispers of prayers left unanswered. The rivers, cascading through the valleys, carried the weight of their tears, their currents pulling at the edges of the mortal and the divine. On moonlit nights, when the mist clung to the peaks like a shroud, villagers would hear faint strains of music or the rustle of unseen dancers, their presence both a blessing and a warning. There is a tale of a hunter who stumbled upon an Apsara by a sacred pool. Her form was grotesquely beautiful, her eyes shimmering with both fury and sorrow. She warned him not to approach, her voice trembling with the weight of her curse. But the hunter, overcome by compassion, laid down his bow and whispered a prayer for her release. As he turned to leave, he felt a warm breeze and saw her shadow dissolve into the light of the rising sun, her curse lifted by his kindness. Not all such stories end in redemption. Some speak of travelers lured by the intoxicating beauty of these cursed beings, only to vanish without a trace. A merchant, enchanted by an Apsara's dance near a secluded waterfall, followed her into the depths of the forest, never to return. Villagers found his belongings days later, scattered and untouched, as if abandoned in haste. They whispered that the Apsara, unable to break free from her curse, had taken him into the shadows, his soul now entwined with her eternal torment. The duality of these beings, at once divine and monstrous, serves as a reflection of the fragile balance between light and darkness. Their stories, passed down through generations, carry a weight that is both cautionary and poignant. They remind us of the consequences of arrogance, the fragility of grace, and the depths of longing that can bind even the most radiant souls. And so, the celestial music continues, weaving through the mountains, an eternal lament for a paradise lost. It is a reminder that beauty, even in its most divine form, can bear the scars of pain and punishment, leaving behind echoes that linger in the hearts of those who dare to listen. The forest trembled as a low, guttural roar echoed through the dense trees, blending with the screech of a mighty bird slicing through the air. A shadow loomed over the land, monstrous and elegant, moving with an unnatural grace that defied its size. With 8 powerful legs that thundered against the earth, wings that carried storms, and a face carved from the primal fury of a lion, the Sharaba descended like a nightmare come alive. Born from the chaos that lingers between worlds, the Sharaba was no ordinary predator. It was a being of legend, feared for its unparalleled strength and ferocity, a creature that thrived in the spaces where gods and mortals tread cautiously. Its lion-like body was a symbol of raw, unyielding power, while its avian wings stretched across the sky like the shadows of impending doom. The air around it crackled with an energy that whispered of ancient forces older than time itself. There are whispers that the Sharaba was not merely a beast, but a force created to challenge the divine. Some say it was Shiva himself who summoned the creature, a manifestation of the destroyer's unrelenting will. Others argue that the Sharaba emerged from the earth, a guardian turned rogue, its purpose lost in the tides of cosmic upheaval. Whatever its origin, one thing remained certain: its presence heralded chaos. One tale speaks of the clash between Narasimha, the lion-headed avatar of Vishnu, and the Sharaba. Narasimha, having defeated the demon Hiranyakashipu, was consumed by his rage and thirst for destruction, threatening the balance of the universe. The Sharaba was unleashed as a counterforce, an entity capable of subduing even a god. When the two collided, the skies burned, and the ground beneath them quaked as if the very fabric of existence was straining under the weight of their battle. The Sharaba, with its 8 legs, moved like an unstoppable tempest, each stride carrying the force of 1,000 storms. Its roar shook mountains, and its talons sliced through the air with the precision of a divine blade. Narasimha, though equally ferocious, found himself locked in a dance of strength and strategy. The clash was not merely physical, it was the collision of 2 cosmic principles, creation and destruction, fury and control. The confrontation between the Sharaba and Shiva is another tale etched into the annals of mythology. Shiva, the great destroyer, saw in the Sharaba a reflection of his own essence, a creature as untamed and boundless as the fire that burned in his heart. The battle that followed was not one of dominance but understanding. Shiva, in his infinite wisdom, sought to tame the beast not through annihilation but through transcendence. When the dust settled, it is said the Sharaba bowed before Shiva, not in submission but in acknowledgement of a force that mirrored its own. Yet, the Sharaba was not merely a bringer of destruction. Beneath its terrifying exterior lay a purpose forged in the crucible of cosmic duty. It was both a guardian and a predator, its duality a testament to the complexity of existence. Villagers who lived near the forests where the Sharaba was said to roam spoke of its shadow passing silently over their homes, protecting them from unseen dangers. But they also told of its wrath, unleashed upon those who dared disturb the delicate balance of the land. There is an ancient hymn that describes the Sharaba's wings as sheltering the righteous and sweeping away the wicked. The beast's roar, though fearsome, was also a warning, a call to respect the natural order. Those who understood this survived, those who did not became echoes in the wind. A hunter once ventured into the forbidden woods, drawn by tales of the Sharaba's golden mane and feathered glory. Armed with arrogance and a quiver of poisoned arrows, he believed himself capable of conquering the beast. For days, the forest seemed to watch him, its silence growing heavier with every step. Then, under a blood-red moon, the hunter faced the creature. The Sharaba did not attack immediately, it stared into his soul, its eyes a molten mix of fury and sorrow. When it moved, it was not with rage, but a swiftness so precise that the hunter had no time to scream. His fate was a reminder etched into the hearts of those who heard his story: the Sharaba was not to be hunted. And yet, there were those who saw the Sharaba as a symbol of hope, a protector against forces that threatened the fragile balance of their world. Its 8 legs, some believed, represented the paths of Dharma, its wings the aspirations of the soul to rise above earthly confines. The lion in its form was the courage to face adversity, while the bird was the freedom to transcend it. To them, the Sharaba was not a monster but a teacher, albeit a fearsome one. The mountains where the Sharaba was said to dwell became sacred ground. Pilgrims would leave offerings at the edge of the forest, not out of fear but respect. They would sing songs that honored its strength and prayed for its protection. For them, the Sharaba was not merely a creature of legend, but a living embodiment of the universe's relentless balance, terrifying, awe-inspiring, and undeniably real. Even now, when the winds howl through the valleys and the night seems darker than it should be, there are those who say the Sharaba still roams. Its roar, they claim, can be heard in the thunder, its shadow glimpsed in the fleeting flashes of lightning. Whether it is a protector or predator, one truth remains: the Sharaba is a reminder of the forces that exist beyond human comprehension, forces that challenge us, protect us, and keep the delicate dance of creation and destruction alive. The moon hung low over the forest, its silver light casting eerie shadows among the trees. From the edge of a quiet village, a soft melody drifted through the night air, its haunting beauty sending chills down the spines of those who heard it. The song was unlike anything mortal lips could conjure, a sound that danced between sorrow and ecstasy, beckoning yet foreboding. At its source, hidden among the woods, stood a figure that seemed half human, half something else entirely. The Kinara. Or perhaps, the Kimpurusha. They were beings of contradiction, their very essence a puzzle. In some tales, they were radiant, noble creatures, guardians of divine realms, and singers of celestial hymns. In others, they were monstrous hybrids, cursed to roam the world in torment, luring the unwary to their doom. The truth was as elusive as the wind. Were they saviors or deceivers? Angels or predators? The Kinara, described as part human and part bird, were said to be unmatched in their grace and beauty. With feathers shimmering like molten gold and voices that could soothe even the most restless souls, they were thought to reside in heavenly realms. They brought joy to gods and mortals alike, their songs carrying messages of love, longing, and the mysteries of existence. To see a Kinara was to glimpse a fragment of perfection, a reminder of the divine. But the Kimpurushas were different. While their human animal form varied, some part lion, others tiger or horse, they bore an air of sadness, even menace. Their presence was often tied to tales of isolation, loss, and transformation. Some say they were once human, cursed by fate or divine wrath to bear the burden of their monstrous forms. Others believed they were protectors of sacred spaces, fierce and unyielding, their duality a reflection of the untamed wilderness they guarded. One legend speaks of a prince who ventured into a dense forest to hunt. He was drawn by a sweet, lilting tune that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. As he followed the sound, he stumbled upon a Kinara perched on a tree branch, her feathered arms glinting in the dappled sunlight. Her eyes met his, and in that moment, the world seemed to stop. The prince felt as though he had found something he didn't know he was searching for, a connection to something larger than himself. But as he reached out, the Kinara recoiled, her song turning mournful. She spoke of her love for a god and the curse that bound her to the forest, unable to leave, unable to fulfill her heart's deepest desire. The prince begged her to return with him to his kingdom, to share her songs with his people. But she refused. "To hear my song is a gift," she whispered. "To possess it would be your curse." In another tale, a Kimpurusha stood guard at the gates of a sacred temple high in the mountains. Travelers spoke of a ferocious beast that blocked their path, its roar echoing through the valleys. Yet those who dared to approach with offerings and prayers found the creature transformed, its fierce eyes softened, and its growls turned to a low, melodic hum. It was said that the Kimpurusha tested the hearts of those who sought entry, rewarding the pure and driving away the deceitful. But the line between protector and monster was thin, and those who failed the test often vanished without a trace. The duality of these beings made them impossible to categorize. They inspired reverence and fear in equal measure. Some believed the Chimera were celestial musicians who fell from grace, their songs tinged with the pain of longing for a home they could never return to. Others said the Chimera were earthly spirits, bound to the land they once roamed freely, their animal forms a reflection of their untamed nature. A forgotten poem tells of a Chimera who fell in love with a mortal artist. She revealed herself to him in the guise of a bird, her feathers gleaming like starlight. Each day, she sang as he painted, and his work grew more beautiful than anything the world had ever seen. But as their love deepened, the Chimera began to fade, her form becoming translucent, her song growing fainter. To love a mortal is to lose myself, she told him with a tearful smile before vanishing into the wind. The artist, heartbroken, spent the rest of his life searching for her, his paintings growing darker and more desperate. Yet for every story of love and grace, there were darker tales. Travelers spoke of being led astray by Chimera, their cries echoing like wild animals in the night. Entire villages were said to have been wiped out by the wrath of these beings, their animal instincts overpowering their human restraint. But even in their fury, there was a tragic undertone. Many believed that the Chimera lashed out not out of malice but pain born of their cursed existence, caught between two worlds and belonging to neither. The villagers in the shadow of the mountains would often leave offerings at the edge of the forest, bowls of milk, fruits, and garlands of flowers. They didn't know whether these gifts would appease or honor the beings that watched from the shadows, but they hoped it was enough to keep the balance intact. On rare occasions, a melody would drift through the air after the offerings were placed, a sign, they believed, that the Chimera or Chimera had accepted their tribute. Even now, when the wind rustles the leaves in an uncanny rhythm or a distant song echoes across a moonlit lake, there are those who claim to feel their presence. The Chimera and Chimera are reminders of the fragile line between beauty and terror, divinity and monstrosity. They are beings of duality, their stories woven with threads of grace and sorrow, love and fear. They may not be seen, but they are felt, an eternal presence in the myths and hearts of those who dare to believe. The sky trembled as thunder cracked through the heavens. From the depths of a storm that seemed to swallow the world whole, there came a figure, a monstrous silhouette, soaring with a power that made the earth tremble beneath its wings. Its enormous form blotted out the sun, casting the land below into a chilling shadow. This was no ordinary bird. This was the Barunda, the double-headed eagle, and with its mighty wings, it carried the weight of both creation and destruction. In the ancient tales, Barunda is described as a creature with two heads, each as fierce and powerful as the other. It is said to have the ability to see in every direction, its vision all-encompassing, sharp, and unforgiving. With one head, it symbolizes destruction, its talons ripping through the fabric of the world, its screeches echoing the chaos that follows. But with the other, it symbolizes protection, its wings sheltering the innocent, its gaze watching over those who need it most. A being of contradictions, Barunda embodies the dual forces that govern the universe. The first time the world heard of Barunda, it was under a sky that had never been darker. The earth itself seemed to cower under the beast's presence, feeling the tension in the air, as if something momentous was about to happen. The legends say that when the gods saw the chaos creeping across the realms, they summoned this fearsome bird to defend their sacred lands. The Barunda, with its two heads, stood at the border of the divine and the mortal worlds. Each head represented a different aspect of the cosmos, one embodying creation and life, the other holding the power of death and destruction. But the question that lingered was always the same: could something that symbolizes both be trusted? Was it a guardian, or was it a harbinger of doom? In the tales passed down through generations, there are those who speak of the Barunda with reverence, honoring it as a protector of the gods. There are others who speak with fear, for they have seen its wrath firsthand. The truth, they say, is not as simple as one would think. One legend tells of a time when a great city, nestled at the foot of the mountains, stood in the path of an army that threatened to bring destruction to all it touched. As the soldiers drew nearer, the people prayed, their voices rising in a chorus of desperation. The heavens darkened, and in the blink of an eye, the Barunda descended from the sky. Its wings sliced through the clouds, sending gusts of wind that uprooted trees and toppled buildings. The people looked up in fear, But then, as if by some miracle, the bird turned its gaze upon the approaching enemy. With one head, the Barunda let out a terrifying cry, a sound so powerful it echoed across the valleys. The enemy faltered, their weapons clattering to the ground, their courage shattered by the sheer force of the bird's presence. The Barunda swooped down with incredible speed, its talons gripping the ground as it landed. But in that instant, the second head of the Barunda looked back at the villagers, its eyes softening with a sense of protectiveness. It spread its wings, sheltering the people from the turmoil that raged outside. As the battle raged on, the Barunda fought with the fury of a storm, its talons slashing through the air, defending those it had sworn to protect. The enemy, paralyzed with fear, soon retreated. But not all stories of the Barunda end with victory. There is one account that haunts the mountains to this day, whispered among the villagers during long winter nights. It tells of a time when the Barunda was summoned not as a protector but as an instrument of divine wrath. A kingdom, led by a cruel and heartless ruler, was destroying the land. The people suffered, their cries lost to the wind. In their desperation, they turned to the gods, hoping for salvation. The Barunda came, but not as a savior. With its wings spread wide, it swept across the sky with a vengeance. One head roared with anger, and the other with sorrow. The sky turned red as the bird unleashed its fury, tearing through the earth and bringing the once prosperous kingdom to ruin. The ruler was said to have been consumed by the very wrath of the bird, his life snatched away in an instant. The people, though freed from the tyrant, were left with a reminder of the cost of cruelty. Even in its most terrifying moments, the Barunda is not purely a force of evil. It is the embodiment of balance, the reminder that every force in the world, whether destructive or protective, exists for a reason. The Barunda's duality speaks to the harsh truth of life itself. There can be no protection without danger, no creation without destruction. Each moment is a battle between the forces of good and evil, light and darkness, life and death. And sometimes, those forces come in the form of a creature with two heads, staring into the abyss of existence, with the power to shape the world with its wings. As the years pass, the stories of the Barunda continue to live on. Some see it as a divine protector, a bird that watches over them when they are most vulnerable. Others, especially those who have felt the sting of its wrath, regard it with a wary respect. To see the Barunda in the sky is to understand that there are forces in the universe far greater than the mortal world can comprehend. It is to know that the balance between life and death is fragile, and that sometimes, the things we fear the most are the ones who protect us in the end. And so, the Barunda continues to soar through the skies of myth and legend, a creature of both destruction and protection, its dual nature reminding all who hear its story that nothing in this world is ever truly one thing or another. It is a lesson written in the very air we breathe, the winds that carry its wings, the storms that follow in its wake, and the silence that falls when its gaze turns towards us. High above the towering peaks of the Himalayas, where the air is thin and the earth feels closer to the heavens, a figure soars through the mist. Its wings stretch wide, cutting through the cold, crisp air, sending a ripple of awe through the few who are lucky enough to witness its grace. This is no ordinary bird. Its feathers shimmer like the stars, its gaze piercing, yet kind, as if it holds the knowledge of the ages within its eyes. It is the simurgh, a mythical creature whose presence leaves a mark on the soul. The simurgh's legend is ancient, passed down through the whispers of the wind and the rustling of leaves in the Himalayan forests. Stories of this bird stretch beyond the reach of time, existing in both the sacred scrolls of forgotten temples and the dreams of those who seek wisdom from the skies. In the tales, it is said that the simurgh holds the power to cleanse the world of its impurities, to bring rebirth to those who seek its help, and to challenge even the mighty Garuda, the legendary bird of Hindu mythology. But what makes the simurgh truly fascinating is not just its majesty or power, but its deep connection to the mountains themselves. The birds of prey that soar over the Himalayan peaks are no mere creatures of flight, they are guardians of secrets, sentinels of ancient knowledge. And the simurgh, the greatest of them all, is said to be the one who watches over the world from above, seeing everything and understanding the hidden truths of existence. The people of the mountains tell stories of the simurgh's magnificent plumage, radiant with the colors of the dawn and dusk. It is said that to gaze upon its feathers is to be filled with an overwhelming sense of peace, a calm that settles in the heart like a gentle stream. But the simurgh is not a passive creature. No, it is a bird of action. It swoops down from its heavenly perch, its wings beating the wind into submission, and when it lands, the earth trembles beneath its weight. Yet, it is a protector. Those who seek its help are said to be granted protection from the storms of life. The simurgh is both a creator and destroyer, capable of bringing new life and sweeping away corruption in one fell swoop. In one legend, a young warrior, lost in the forests of the Himalayas, wandered for days, cold and starving. His spirit had begun to wither, and his hope was fading with each passing moment. But then, as if summoned by his desperation, the simurgh appeared. The bird circled above, its wings slicing through the air like a divine blade. The warrior, weak and tired, could hardly lift his eyes to meet the creature's gaze. But when he did, he saw something that filled him with hope, a promise of salvation. The simurgh descended, its massive wings sending a gust of wind that filled the young man's lungs with fresh air. With a cry that echoed through the valley, the bird landed beside him and gave him a single feather. As soon as the warrior touched it, he felt strength returning to his body, as though the simurgh had breathed life back into him. The bird gave him a second feather, then a third, each one empowering him further. And with that, the warrior rose, renewed and ready to face the challenges ahead. But not all encounters with the simurgh are so serene. There are tales that tell of its fierce side, of the times it has clashed with other legendary beings, most notably Garuda. Garuda, the mighty bird of Vishnu, is a symbol of strength and speed, and often portrayed as the eternal enemy of serpents. Yet, even Garuda, with all its power, could not defeat the simurgh. The stories say that the two birds locked in combat, their talons tearing through the air, their wings creating storms that shook the heavens. The battle between them was not one of good versus evil, but a test of wills, of the forces of nature battling for supremacy. As they fought, the sky itself seemed to buckle under the weight of their struggle. The wind howled, and lightning split the clouds. Yet, in the end, it was not violence that decided the outcome, but wisdom. The simurgh, with its ancient knowledge, understood that strength alone could not sustain the world. And so, rather than strike the fatal blow, the simurgh spread its wings wide and created a powerful gust that pushed Garuda back. The two birds circled each other, their eyes locked in mutual understanding. Both were powerful, but each had its role in the balance of the world. The simurgh, with its deep connection to the divine, chose peace over destruction. What makes the simurgh so captivating is not just its role in the battle between these titans, but its place within the stories of the mountain people. The birds of prey that rule the skies above the Himalayas, whether they be eagles, vultures, or hawks, are seen as messengers. They are believed to carry the souls of the departed to the heavens, guiding them to the afterlife with the grace of 1,000 winds. And in the eyes of these people, the simurgh is not just a bird, it is a symbol of transformation. It is a reminder that, no matter how dark the path, there is always a chance for rebirth. In the shadow of the simurgh's mighty wings, the mountain dwellers tell their children stories of this legendary bird. They speak of its ability to rise above the trials of life, to soar beyond the reach of despair, and to bring hope to those who need it most. And in those stories, the people find strength, for they know that as long as the simurgh watches over them, they will never be alone. It is said that when the time is right, the simurgh will return to the mountains, descending from the heavens once more to guide those who seek its wisdom. Until that day comes, the people wait, their hearts filled with anticipation, for they know that in the flight of the simurgh, they will find a reminder that no matter the darkness of the world, there is always a light on the horizon. And that light, whether it is the simurgh itself, or the hope it brings, will guide them through the storms of life. The moon hung low over the forest, casting a pale, eerie light across the winding path. A man, tired and weary from a long day's journey, stumbled through the thick trees, the silence broken only by the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze. His eyes strained to make out the trail ahead. Suddenly, from the shadows, a figure appeared, a woman, draped in white, her long, dark hair cascading down her back. She seemed to glide, her feet barely touching the ground. Her eyes were pools of darkness, reflecting the moonlight like two deep wells. "Are you lost?" Her voice was soft, a whisper that sent a chill down his spine. The man nodded, his heart racing. There was something about her presence that felt otherworldly, yet strangely comforting. She smiled, but there was something unsettling about it, a coldness in her gaze that didn't match the warmth of her voice. He couldn't place it, but there was an unspoken pull, a feeling that he should trust her, even though every instinct in his body screamed to turn and run. But he didn't. He followed her. She led him deeper into the woods, farther from the path he knew, and into the thickening darkness. The trees seemed to close in around them, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out. The man's mind began to cloud, and before he knew it, his steps slowed. Something was wrong. His feet felt heavy, like he was walking through water. But she didn't stop. She kept moving, her figure growing more distant, yet still so close. Then, as the fog grew thicker, something happened. The woman turned, her smile widening in the moonlight. But it was no longer the face of a living woman. Her mouth stretched unnaturally wide, revealing rows of sharp, yellowed teeth. Her eyes, now pools of empty darkness, locked onto his with an intensity that made his blood run cold. Her feet, once delicate and beautiful, now seemed twisted, the toes curling back at odd angles, like claws. And then, with a guttural growl, she lunged at him. This was no ordinary ghost. She was the Churel, the vengeful spirit of a wronged woman, a creature that had been twisted by betrayal, grief, and a thirst for revenge. The legend of the Churel is one that has haunted the hearts and minds of many, passed down through generations like a dark, whispered warning. It tells of a woman, once full of life and love, who met a tragic and cruel fate. She died too soon, her soul torn from her body before her time, and in her vengeance, she returned as something unrecognizable. The Churel, a spirit so angry and consumed with rage, now walks the earth in search of men to lure to their doom. Her beauty, once her greatest gift, now a weapon used to ensnare her victims. She appears as a beautiful woman, with flowing hair and a soft, sweet voice that tempts those who hear it. But beneath her surface, there is something deeply wrong. Her feet, unlike any humans, are turned backward, a subtle clue to her true nature. It's a sign that the man who falls for her charms is already lost. No one is quite sure what she seeks. Some say she is hungry for revenge, others that she is drawn to the warmth of a life she can never have again. All that is known for sure is that once a man falls into her trap, he is doomed to suffer a terrifying end. The Churel leads her victims deep into the wilderness, where no one can hear their screams, and in that remote, shadowy place, she reveals her true form. Her eyes burn with fury, and her mouth opens wide to reveal teeth meant not for kissing, but for devouring. The last thing her victims see is her twisted, monstrous face before she strikes. But the Churel is not a mindless monster. She is the embodiment of the hurt and anger that comes from betrayal, from being wronged in the most intimate and painful way. She is a reflection of the broken, torn heart of a woman who loved deeply, only to have her life taken from her too soon. In her rage, she becomes something far more dangerous than any living creature could ever be. She becomes the very essence of vengeance, an unstoppable force fueled by the desire to make those who hurt her feel the same agony. For those who live in the rural areas where the Churel is said to wander, her legend serves as both a warning and a curse. Parents tell their children to stay away from the forests after dark, to avoid the paths where the trees grow thick, and to never trust a woman who seems too beautiful to be real. They tell tales of men who went into the woods with their hearts full of lust, only to be lost forever. They speak of the cold wind that whispers through the trees on moonlit nights, the eerie stillness that warns of her presence. The Churel, in some ways, is an embodiment of the darker side of love, a love that turns toxic, a love that is so consuming it destroys. The rage that she carries with her is not just the rage of a woman wronged by the world, but a reflection of the pain that so many have felt in their lives, the loneliness and the suffering that come from betrayal and heartbreak. She is, in a twisted way, a symbol of what can happen when pain is left unchecked, when grief is not allowed to heal. As she roams the forests, searching for her next victim, her story becomes a part of the fabric of the land. People speak her name in hushed tones, afraid that even mentioning her will summon her from the shadows. But no matter how many warnings are passed down, some men will always be drawn to her beauty, to the sweet, haunting voice that calls them into the darkness. And when they do, they will learn too late the price of trusting the wrong thing, too late to escape the cold, merciless grip of the Churel. Her story lives on in the dark corners of the world, reminding us of the danger that lies in unchecked desire and pain that has not been given time to heal. She is the ghost of every woman who has been wronged, the embodiment of every broken heart, every lost hope. She is a reminder that vengeance is a powerful force, one that can change the very nature of a soul. And for those who cross her path, it is a force that will never let them forget the price of their actions. In the stillness of a forgotten graveyard, where the air hangs heavy with the weight of time, something stirs beneath the earth. The ground shifts, disturbed by an unseen hand, and from the dark depths of the earth, a figure rises. Its eyes are empty hollows, void of life yet brimming with something far worse. It does not walk, it hovers, as though the very air itself carries it. Its form is the shape of a man, but the skin is pale, stretched tight over bones that creak like an old door. The Vetala has awakened. Once, it was human, like all who walk the earth. But now, it is something else, an undead creature that lurks in the shadows, hungry for the living and bound by ancient forces. It possesses the bodies of the dead, twisting them into vessels for its twisted, restless spirit. The Vetala is no mere ghost, it is the embodiment of decay and possession, a spirit that challenges not only the physical world but the very fabric of wisdom itself. Legends say that the Vetala preys upon those who are brave enough to seek answers to questions beyond mortal understanding. There are stories of scholars and wise men, traveling deep into the forests or near ancient burial grounds, drawn by the need to prove their intellect. They sought knowledge, thinking that their wisdom could outwit the ancient spirits that guarded the secrets of the earth. But no one is ever truly prepared for the Vetala. In some versions of the tale, the Vetala chooses its victim. It enters the body of a deceased person, animating the corpse with a mind that is not its own. The body moves again, its stiff limbs cracking as it stands, its once peaceful face twisted into an expression of torment. But it is not the dead man who lives again, it is the Vetala, using the body to roam the earth, seeking out the wise and the foolish alike. Those who encounter the Vetala do not know what they are dealing with until it is too late. The spirit speaks with the voice of the deceased, pretending to be the person once known, but it is always a lie, a mask that hides something far darker. One of the most chilling aspects of the Vetala is its challenge to human intellect. It does not simply kill, it toys with its victims, presenting them with riddles, questions that cannot be answered. The wise men and scholars who venture too close are drawn into a deadly game of wits. A single wrong answer, and they are lost forever, trapped in the Vetala's grasp. Those who dare to think they can outsmart the undead spirit are soon brought to their knees, realizing too late that some things are beyond even the sharpest minds. In one well-known story, a king hires a learned man, an intellectual of great renown, to uncover the truth behind the strange happenings in a remote village. Rumors had been circulating about the Vetala, how it haunted the burial grounds, how it used the bodies of the dead to speak. The learned man, confident in his abilities, accepts the task, certain that his wisdom will allow him to outwit the creature. He ventures into the forest, finds the graveyard, and there, beneath the moonlight, the Vetala makes itself known. The man hears the sound of footsteps, slow and deliberate. The body of a long-dead man rises from its grave, its eyes wide and unblinking. The creature speaks, its voice hollow, "I will ask you a question, wise one. If you answer correctly, you may leave. But if you fail, you will remain with me forever, as one of the dead." The scholar, undeterred, agrees, thinking that the answer will be simple. The question comes, one that twists the mind and stirs the heart, something that speaks to the very core of human nature. But the answer is elusive, and no matter how hard the man thinks, the words do not come. The Vetala's eyes gleam with dark amusement as the man's confidence fades, replaced by a growing panic. The longer he takes to answer, the more the oppressive weight of the creature's presence presses in on him. The man's heart races. His hands shake, and sweat beads on his forehead. In his desperation, he opens his mouth to speak, but no answer comes, and with that, the Vetala laughs, a sound that echoes through the trees and chills the blood. It was never about the right answer. It was never about the knowledge. The Vetala's true power lies in its ability to break the mind, to stretch the human soul until it snaps under the weight of its own fear and confusion. And just like that, the scholar is lost. His mind is consumed, and his body becomes yet another shell for the Vetala to control. The corpse that had once been a man now walks the earth once more, but it is not the man who controls it. It is the Vetala, feeding off the confusion, the fear, and the hopelessness that the man left behind. The kingdom is never the same again, for no one who crosses the Vetala's path ever returns the same. It is said that the Vetala can challenge anyone, not just the wise, but the brave, the curious, and the foolish alike. The undead spirit knows no boundaries, and no one is immune from its dark grasp. It has the ability to possess the dead, to slip into the body of a fallen warrior or a forgotten king, and to use them to challenge the living. Sometimes it uses riddles, at other times it simply speaks the truth in a way that is too painful to hear. Either way, the Vetala's presence is a reminder that death is not the end, and that the spirits of the earth are as alive as ever, haunting and waiting. But there is something more to the Vetala's existence, something tragic, something that speaks to the deepest, most sorrowful corners of the soul. For the Vetala is not just a creature of malice or vengeance. It is also a reflection of a deep, unfulfilled yearning, a longing for life that was taken too soon. Once a mortal being, the Vetala is bound to the earth, unable to move on, forever haunted by its own existence. It possesses the bodies of the dead not out of malice alone, but out of an insatiable hunger for meaning, for answers that the living are not able to give. And so it waits, in graveyards and forgotten places, challenging anyone who dares to seek its secrets. But in the end, the Vetala does not just guard knowledge, it guards the truth of what it is to be truly lost, to be trapped between life and death, forever seeking something that can never be found. Thunder rumbled through the skies, not as a warning but as a promise. The heavens trembled, and beneath them, the earth seemed to shrink, its surface quaking. A storm was brewing, its power not from clouds or winds, but from the ancient battle that had been fought for eons. It was the age-old clash between good and evil, between gods and monsters. And at the center of it all, coiled in the darkness, was Ahi, the serpent, a creature so immense, so monstrous, that its very existence struck fear into the hearts of those who whispered its name. Ahi was no mere snake, no ordinary creature of the earth. It was a force of nature, an embodiment of chaos itself. A serpent whose body spanned the horizon, its coils stretching across the land, suffocating the world in its poisonous grasp. Eyes that gleamed with hatred, and scales that shimmered like obsidian under the moonlight. The air would crackle with an eerie, unnatural stillness before the serpent moved, as if even time itself held its breath. Indra, the god of thunder, had faced many adversaries, but none as persistent as Ahi. The battle between them was not one of a single moment, but of centuries. Ahi, relentless in its hunger for destruction, sought to drown the world in endless darkness, to choke out the light and bring the reign of chaos to the land. Wherever Ahi slithered, the rivers ran dry, the crops withered, and the very skies seemed to darken. Nothing could escape the serpent's crushing embrace. It was a force that never rested, a creature bound by an ancient curse to stand against the gods themselves. Indra had fought with all his might, summoning his thunderbolts, the mighty Vajra, to strike at the serpent's scales, but the serpent was too swift, too elusive. With each thunderous blow, Ahi seemed to grow stronger, its venomous power flowing through the veins of the earth, poisoning everything it touched. The more Indra fought, the more he realized that it was not simply a battle for the heavens, it was a battle for the very survival of the world. But there is a moment in every battle when the tides begin to turn. The heavens, as ancient and wise as they were, had seen the pattern, that in the face of overwhelming darkness, a light must shine, even if it was to come from the most unexpected of places. It was in that quiet, heartbreaking moment, when it seemed like all hope had been lost, that Indra, weary and scarred, found his answer. Ahi's body was a twisted mass of evil, a labyrinth that wound through the universe itself, and Indra, though powerful, was human in his limitations. But the gods were not bound by the same rules. In the heart of a storm, in the swirling chaos that surrounded them, Indra did what he had never done before. He called upon all the forces of nature, fire, water, wind, and bent them to his will. He called upon the storm not just to strike at Ahi's flesh, but to bind the very essence of the serpent, to trap its soul in a storm of unimaginable power. In that moment, as thunder split the skies and lightning crackled through the air, Ahi was no longer the untouchable beast that had haunted the heavens for so long. It was trapped, its coils frozen in time, as Indra's mighty weapon struck with all the fury of the heavens. The serpent writhed in agony, but it could not escape. But the victory was not without its price. The battle between Indra and Ahi had torn the world apart. The earth shook with the weight of their conflict, and the skies, once calm, were filled with the crackling energy of their struggle. Even as Ahi was struck down, its power lingered, casting a long shadow across the world. The serpent's final scream echoed through the valleys, a sound so pure in its hatred, so full of anguish, that it seemed to shake the very foundation of the earth. Indra stood victorious, but even he could not escape the toll the battle had taken on him. He had defeated Ahi, yes, but in doing so, he had brought forth the devastation that the serpent had promised. The world was scarred, forever changed. And in the quiet aftermath, as the storm clouds began to dissipate and the winds calmed, Indra stood alone, looking at the remains of the battlefield. Ahi had been vanquished, but the memory of its terror would never fade. And yet, despite the destruction, there was a glimmer of hope. For Indra knew that with every victory over chaos, with every struggle to preserve the light, there would always be a cost. The world would heal, but only because of the sacrifice that had been made. Ahi's defeat had not come easily, but it had come because of the relentless strength of the gods and the unwavering courage of those who stood against the darkness. As the storm clouds cleared and the sun began to shine once again, Indra's heart was heavy with the knowledge of the eternal struggle. The battle was never truly over. Ahi, the eternal enemy of Indra, would rise again, perhaps in another form, perhaps in another time. But for now, in this moment, the world was safe. The serpent's reign of terror had been shattered. And in that fleeting peace, Indra, weary as he was, could feel the weight of his victory. It was not a victory of destruction, but of preservation, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light would always find a way to shine through. And so, the heavens, once again, became calm. There is a silence that hangs thick in the air, a silence that makes the very earth tremble, as if all life is holding its breath. In this silence, the figure of a sage stands tall, his mind alight with divine wisdom, his soul burning with the purest of intentions. But in the blink of an eye, something changes. The calm is broken, and before anyone can even comprehend it, the sage is no more. The transformation begins. Once a seeker of truth, once a humble man devoted to the divine, he is now something unrecognizable, a being of fear, of anger, of monstrous power. His form twists, and his features become grotesque. A curse, laid by the gods or by a divine force, has turned him into something else. A beast. A creature of darkness and fury. No longer revered, no longer human, he is now feared, a symbol of what happens when even the wisest of men falter, when they stray too far into realms they are not meant to tread. These are the cursed rishis, sages who were once celebrated for their wisdom and purity. Their names were once spoken with reverence, their teachings sought by kings, gods, and mortals alike. But through misstep or divine wrath, these noble figures were condemned to a fate darker than death itself. They became monsters, twisted by the very forces they once worshipped, forever bound to the shadows they had never known. The stories of these sages, turned beasts, are as tragic as they are horrifying. It begins with a single mistake, a single moment where their pride, their ego, or their weakness led them to challenge a god, to defy the natural order. A god's wrath is swift and final, and the punishment they faced was not only death, it was the transformation into something they feared most. In their new, monstrous forms, they became warnings to the living, reminders that even the most pure of souls could fall from grace. Take the tale of sage Vishvamitra, for example. Once a man of unimaginable power and intellect, Vishvamitra's journey to become a Brahmarishi, the highest of all sages, was a long and grueling one. But it was his pride, his belief that he could equal the gods, that sealed his fate. He angered Indra, the king of the heavens, and for his hubris, was cursed. The curse turned him into a Rakshasa, a demon, a beast of unimaginable terror. In that moment, Vishvamitra ceased to be the revered sage he had once been, and became an embodiment of his own downfall. The curse shattered him. Once a sage whose wisdom lit the world, he was now a creature of rage and hunger. His mind, still sharp with divine knowledge, could only watch helplessly as his body morphed into a terrifying figure, a monster of fangs and claws, of shadow and flame. He was forced to roam the earth, a monster trapped in the body of the very beast he once feared. But even in his monstrous form, there was no peace. His heart, still aching for the loss of his humanity, struggled to reconcile the sage he had been with the monster he had become. The rage of his transformation never left him. And then there was the tale of sage Markandeya. Though young in age, his devotion to Lord Shiva was unmatched. His heart was pure, his soul burning with the fire of truth. But in his devotion, he crossed a line that would forever haunt him. Shiva, in his divine wrath, cursed him to live forever, making Markandeya immortal. The curse was not a gift, however, it was a prison. His immortality meant that he would never find peace, never die, never be freed from the cycle of life and death. Over time, Markandeya's body began to rot and decay, his face becoming distorted, his limbs twisted into unnatural shapes. He became a beast of the earth, a horrifying figure that haunted the very land. In his endless torment, he lost all sense of time, his mind crumbling under the weight of his curse. The once beautiful sage, who had known nothing but devotion and purity, became a symbol of tragic immortality. No matter how much he tried to free himself from the curse, he was bound forever. His body decayed, but his soul remained intact, forever doomed to suffer in the form of the very creature he once feared. Then there was the story of Sage Bhrigu, another sage who, though wise and pure, faced a devastating fate. His pride, too, led to his downfall. When Bhrigu challenged Lord Vishnu's supremacy, Vishnu, in his infinite patience, cursed Bhrigu to transform into a beast. With this curse, Bhrigu was condemned to become a monstrous, unrecognizable creature, with a body warped beyond recognition. Once a wise sage, Bhrigu now roamed the forests, alone and forgotten, a shadow of his former self. But these stories, though filled with suffering and loss, are more than just cautionary tales. They are stories of the human condition. They remind us that no matter how great one's wisdom or virtue may be, even the most righteous can falter. These cursed rishis, once so revered, now symbolize the fragility of the human spirit. Their fate is a reflection of how one's inner demons can shape their destiny. For these sages, their new forms were not just physical, they were spiritual. The curse they bore did not only change their bodies, it twisted their souls, warping their once pure hearts into places of darkness and despair. They were forced to wander, never finding peace, always haunted by their past and the monsters they had become. Their stories serve as a reminder that pride, even in the pursuit of the divine, can lead to a fall from grace. Their transformation into beasts was not just the result of divine anger, it was the consequence of their own internal struggle. In their quest for greater knowledge, greater power, they lost the very thing that made them human, their humility, their compassion, their connection to the world around them. And so, these cursed sages became both legends and warnings. They are remembered not just for their wisdom, but for the cost of that wisdom. The monstrous forms they took were not merely the result of divine wrath, they were a reflection of the pain and loneliness that followed. Their spirits, twisted and lost, continue to haunt the world, reminding us that even the greatest of minds can fall, and that the cost of pride may be more than any soul can bear. The midnight air was thick with a silence so profound it seemed alive. In the flicker of distant flames, shadows danced upon ancient stone walls, and from the depths of that unyielding darkness came a sound, a growl, low and menacing, that sent a shiver down the spine. Then they emerged, their forms fearsome, their presence overwhelming, the companions of Bhairava. They were not ordinary beings. Each step they took seemed to carry the weight of countless ages, their forms grotesque yet mesmerizing. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, piercing through the gloom like fireflies trapped in an eternal storm. These were no mere protectors, they were manifestations of the raw, untamed energy of their master. They embodied rage, vengeance, and unwavering loyalty, forces unleashed only in moments of ultimate judgment. Bhairava, the fierce manifestation of Lord Shiva, was not alone in his eternal vigil over the cosmic order. His companions, terrifying in their might, followed him with unwavering devotion. These creatures were born not of kindness but of fury, their essence forged in the crucible of destruction and creation. They did not just protect, they punished. They did not merely guard, they annihilated anything that dared to cross their god. Among them was Vetala, a being with the head of a corpse and the body of a warrior. Its skeletal face was frozen in a grotesque grin, as if mocking the very concept of life and death. Vetala carried a rusted trident, its prongs stained with the blood of countless transgressors. This companion of Bhairava did not walk but seemed to hover above the ground, an eerie specter whose mere presence drained the warmth from the air. It was said that to meet Vetala's gaze was to confront your deepest fears, your darkest sins reflected back at you with unrelenting clarity. Then there was Krodana, the embodiment of rage itself. This beast had the body of a hulking demon, its muscles rippling with unnatural strength, and a head wreathed in flames that flickered and roared as if fed by its eternal fury. Its claws were as sharp as the finest blades, capable of slicing through stone and bone alike. Krodana's roar was said to shake mountains, a primal sound that reduced even the bravest warriors to trembling children. When Bhairava sought to punish, it was Krodana who delivered the blow, his wrath as unyielding as time. And yet, not all of Bhairava's companions were creatures of brute force. There was also Niruti, a figure cloaked in shadow, its form ever shifting, its face obscured as if veiled by the night itself. Niruti did not strike with weapons or claws, but with silence. It moved like a phantom, unseen and unheard, and when it struck, it was as if the darkness itself had come alive. Niruti was the perfect assassin, its touch a harbinger of inevitable death. These creatures, however terrifying, were not mindless monsters. They were bound by purpose, their every action a reflection of Bhairava's will. They punished those who broke sacred laws, who desecrated the divine, who sought to disrupt the balance of existence. And in their terrifying presence, there was a strange, paradoxical sense of justice. For as horrifying as they were, they served a god whose fury was tempered by wisdom, whose destruction was always a precursor to renewal. There were whispers of other beings who followed Bhairava, each one more fearsome than the last. Rakshasas, the blood drinker, whose elongated fangs and crimson-streaked face struck terror into even the boldest hearts. Churel, the wide-mouthed, whose laughter echoed through desolate lands, a sound that heralded doom. And Mahishasura, the great-bodied, whose sheer size and strength made mountains tremble in his presence. These were the soldiers, the guardians, the executors of Bhairava's divine justice. But their tales do not merely speak of terror, they evoke a strange, haunting beauty. For in their grotesque forms and fearsome deeds, they carried the essence of Bhairava's mission, to protect what was sacred, to destroy what was corrupt, to maintain the delicate balance of existence. These companions were terrifying, yes, but they were also awe-inspiring, their loyalty and purpose shining through the darkness like stars in an endless night. Their existence was not without pain. Bound to Bhairava by their very creation, they had no will of their own, no choice but to follow him through the endless cycles of time. In their monstrous forms, there was a tragedy, a reminder that even those who serve the divine may bear the burden of their role. Their eyes, though fierce, often held a flicker of sorrow, a hint of the humanity that may have once been theirs, lost now in the eternal service of a god. The ancient texts speak of the companions with a mix of reverence and dread. They are not merely beings to fear, They are forces of nature, entities that remind us of the power and fury of the divine. Their stories are etched into the fabric of time, whispered in the winds that howl through abandoned temples, carried by the rivers that flow through desolate lands. And even now, in the silent hours of the night, some say you can feel their presence. When the air grows cold and the shadows seem to move on their own, when the silence is broken by a sound that has no source, it is said that Bhairava's companions are near. They are eternal, unyielding, and ever watchful, bound to their master and his mission until the end of time. The ground trembled beneath their paws, each step heavy with the weight of fate. A chilling howl echoed through the stillness, a sound that seemed to pierce the very fabric of life. It was the cry of death itself, a warning carried on the wind. In the distance, the shadows shifted, and there they were, Yama's hounds, the heralds of the end, the fierce guardians of the boundary between life and death. They were not the dogs of the earth, loyal companions who bound themselves to their masters with love. No, these beasts were otherworldly, born from the depths of the underworld, their very presence a promise that no soul could escape the inevitable. Their eyes gleamed like burning coals, the glow of a fire that consumed everything in its path. Each hound, towering in size and covered in matted fur, carried an air of unshakable authority. They were not just creatures, they were the embodiment of death itself. Their master, Yama, the god of death, commanded them with a silence that spoke louder than any command. He, too, was a figure of awe, a god whose domain stretched far beyond the living world. Yet, it was his hounds that brought the message of his arrival, silent, swift, and unrelenting. These dogs did not simply guide the dead to the afterlife, they hunted, they herded, they ensured no soul ever strayed from its path. Each hound had its own story, its own legend, woven into the tapestry of ancient lore. They were the first to appear at the threshold of death, their haunting howls signaling that the time had come. But what was truly terrifying about these beasts was not just their appearance, but the deep sorrow that accompanied their presence. Their eyes, though fierce, held a sadness, the kind of sadness that only creatures born to witness the fall of all things could know. They were not mere monsters, they were mourners of the living, bound to their role with a heavy heart. One such hound was Dumra, named for the smoke that always seemed to billow around him. His coat was a dark, ashen gray, as if it had been dipped in the very fires of the underworld. His bark was like the crackling of 1,000 burning logs, a sound that sent a shiver down the spine of anyone who heard it. It was said that Dumra's presence could freeze the heart with terror, for it was known that where he walked, the boundary between life and death thinned, and the air grew thick with the weight of fate. His howls were a reminder that no one, no matter their status, their wealth, or their power, could escape the end. He was not just a harbinger of death, he was the reminder that all things must pass. Then there was Kalatom, the hound of endless hunger. His body was large and skeletal, yet incredibly powerful, and his breath reeked of decay. Unlike Dumra, who often remained still, Kalatom was constantly on the move. He would pace the boundary between the living and the dead, circling, always restless. His eyes were the color of the deepest night, absorbing all light, and his gaze felt like being swallowed whole by the void. There was no escape from Kalatom. He would chase down the souls that tried to flee, his breath hot on their heels, and his jaws wide, ready to devour them and pull them into the darkness. His name echoed through the underworld, where even the bravest souls feared his approach. Despite their terrifying nature, Yama's hounds were not cruel. They did not seek to cause pain or suffering. They were the gatekeepers, the inevitable force that all souls must face. And yet, in their silence, there was a haunting grief, a deep understanding of the sorrow they brought. For while they may have been the agents of death, they were also the guardians of peace. Without them, the souls of the departed would be lost, wandering aimlessly between worlds, unable to find their final resting place. Their purpose, grim as it was, served a higher calling, a calling that transcended mere destruction and embraced the order of the universe. The hounds were loyal not just to their god, Yama, but to the very nature of existence itself. For in their relentless pursuit, there was a sense of balance, a sense that death was not something to be feared, but something to be accepted. And so, they roamed the worlds, their paws never faltering, their howls never ceasing. In their wake, they left nothing but quiet and peace, as the souls they gathered were carried onward to whatever awaited them in the afterlife. Yet, despite their role as bringers of the end, there was a strange tenderness in the way these hounds moved. It was said that when they reached the soul of a loved one, a gentle nudge from the hound's nose would offer a moment of solace. The soul, knowing that its journey was complete, would finally accept the inevitable and take its first step into the unknown. For even in death, Yama's hounds understood the power of compassion. Some stories say that Yama's hounds were once mortal dogs, creatures who had shown unwavering loyalty and courage in their lives. They were the companions of kings, the protectors of villages, and the guardians of the lost. But upon their death, they were transformed into the mighty hounds that served the god of death. In their monstrous forms, they no longer knew the warmth of a home or the comfort of a master's touch. Yet, in their hearts, there remained the memory of their former lives, and it was this memory that gave them the strength to carry out their divine task. There were whispers among the villagers that on the nights when the wind howled through the trees and the moon hung heavy in the sky, you might hear the distant cry of Yama's hounds. The sound would rise in the stillness, chilling the blood of any who dared to listen. And though fear would grip their hearts, there was a strange comfort in knowing that the hounds were simply doing their duty. The dogs were not monsters of malice, they were the faithful guardians of life's most certain truth. They were the ones who would carry each soul, one by one, through the veil, ensuring that no one was left behind. And in their wake, they left behind only silence, the final peace before the great unknown. There's a chill in the air as the massive stone doors creak open, revealing the grand temple before you. But just beyond the entrance, two figures stand, watching. Their eyes glimmer with a strange light. One is broad and thickly muscled, the other lean and fierce. These beings are the Dwarapala, the gatekeepers of the divine, standing guard against anyone unworthy of crossing into sacred space. At first, they may seem like statues, carved out of rock, their features frozen in time. But then, their eyes shift ever so slightly, and you know, they are watching, waiting. A cold sense of dread wraps around you as their heavy, stone-like hands move slightly, a gesture that signals their readiness. They are not just guardians, they are the final line between mortal and divine. There is no mistaking their power, no escaping their vigilance. Legends say that the Dwarapala are not born of human flesh, but are creations of divine energy. Once mere mortals, they were transformed into these monstrous beings, given strength beyond measure to protect the holy realms. With bodies made of stone, iron, and muscle, they have stood at the gates of temples, guarding the gods from intruders for eons. They are as old as the mountains, as enduring as time itself. Some say their faces were once human, but after centuries of guarding the sacred, their features have become twisted, reflecting the heavy burden they bear. One of the most feared of the Dwarapala is Vetala, a giant whose shoulders seem to touch the heavens. His body is made of glimmering bronze, his arms thick with muscle, and his gaze piercing. As a boy, he was once a devoted disciple, seeking wisdom from the gods. But when the heavens saw his bravery, they gave him a task beyond any mortal's strength. Vetala, now a being of divine might, became the protector of the temple of Shiva. His face is etched with fury and devotion, two qualities that burn deep within his soul. Though he stands tall and fierce, there's something haunting about his eyes, a deep sorrow that hints at the sacrifice he made for his divine calling. Vetala's task is simple but terrifying. He stands at the temple entrance, waiting for any who dare to approach. His voice, when it rings out, is like the sound of thunder, booming through the air with a command that is impossible to ignore. His hands, the size of boulders, will not hesitate to strike down anyone who dares to step past the sacred threshold without respect. His task is not just one of violence, it is one of justice. He is the protector, the unwavering force that separates the divine from the mortal world. Then there is Sundara, a Dwarapala so terrifying that even the bravest of warriors tremble at his name. His body is a blend of steel and stone, a fusion of might and fear. His face, once kind and gentle, has been transformed into a grotesque visage, with sharp angles and fierce eyes that pierce through the very soul of anyone who dares to cross his path. Sundara guards the gates of the temple dedicated to the goddess Durga. He is the embodiment of her wrath, a creature who will not hesitate to unleash her fury upon anyone who seeks to defile the sacred space. Sundara's power lies not just in his strength, but in his ability to read the hearts of those who approach. He doesn't simply stop them, he sees into their souls. He knows who is pure of heart and who seeks to bring darkness into the light. It is said that when a wicked soul approaches the gates, Sundara's gaze alone can send them running in terror, their hearts consumed with guilt and fear. But the Dwarapalakas are not mere creatures of terror. They are also beings of great wisdom, tasked with protecting the sanctity of the divine. Their purpose, though fearsome, is rooted in love and respect for the gods they serve. They understand that their duty is sacred and that without their watchful eyes, the divine realms would be open to destruction. These gatekeepers are, in a sense, the last line of defense, and they carry this responsibility with unwavering dedication. There is a story told by the elders about a traveler who sought to enter the temple of Vishnu. The traveler was a man of great ambition, determined to obtain the blessings of the god, no matter the cost. He approached the gates of the temple, confident that his journey had been righteous, his heart pure. But as he came face to face with the Dwarapalakas, he felt something he could not explain, a chill creeping down his spine, a tightening in his chest. The gatekeeper before him, a towering figure made of granite, stepped forward, blocking his path. "Who are you to seek the god?" the Dwarapalaka asked, his voice like gravel scraping against stone. The man, feeling no fear, boasted of his deeds, his accomplishments. "I have traveled far," he said, "and I have done much good in the world. I seek nothing but the grace of Vishnu." The Dwarapalaka, unmoved, shook his head. "You speak of good deeds," he said, "but they are hollow if your heart does not reflect them. Only the purest souls may enter this temple." The man's confidence faltered, but he persisted. "I have earned this," he declared. "I am worthy." The Dwarapalaka's eyes narrowed, and he placed one hand on the stone pillar beside him. "You may have walked the earth as a man of virtue, but here, only the truth of your soul matters. There are no lies before the gods." With that, the gatekeeper raised his arm, and the man's heart filled with terror. He tried to push past, but the Dwarapalaka's grip was unyielding, a force beyond mortal comprehension. In that moment, the man understood there was no power, no wealth, no arrogance that could pass the gates of the divine without the permission of those who guarded them. The gates creaked shut behind him, and the traveler, humbled and broken, turned away. He had learned, in that brief moment, the true meaning of humility and reverence. The Dwarapalakas were not just monsters, they were the divine protectors of truth. And so, these gatekeepers stand, day after day, year after year, watching over the sacred. Their presence is a reminder that some doors are not meant to be crossed. Some realms are too pure for the unworthy to enter. The Dwarapalakas, in their fierce silence, ensure that only those who are truly deserving may step into the divine presence, where mortals become gods and gods touch the earth. A chill runs down your spine as the wind howls through the night, carrying with it the echoes of ancient battles. In the midst of it all, two names linger in the darkness, Chanda and Munda. These were not just demons, they were embodiments of chaos, their very existence a thorn in the side of the divine. Fearsome and ruthless, they were the very ones who dared to challenge the might of the goddess Durga. But it was their fate to become a part of a tale that would be passed down through generations, a tale of destruction, wrath, and ultimate redemption. Chanda and Munda were not born out of nothing. They were crafted from the darkest corners of the universe, creatures whose very essence was forged in evil. Under the command of the demon king Mahishasura, they were warriors of unparalleled skill and brutality. Their very names sent shivers through the hearts of those who heard them. The mere mention of Chanda, with his savage smile, and Munda, with his menacing laugh, would leave the bravest souls paralyzed with fear. But it was not just their strength that made them terrifying, it was their arrogance, their belief that they could challenge the gods themselves. They were invincible in their eyes, unstoppable, and they sought to spread their reign of terror across the world. Their mission? To bring about the downfall of everything pure, to strip the earth of its innocence, and to cast the world into eternal darkness. As Mahishasura's forces grew, so did their cruelty. They ravaged villages, destroyed temples, and left a trail of destruction wherever they went. They believed that the heavens themselves would tremble in fear before them. And for a time, it seemed as though they were right. They were victorious in every battle, and the gods watched helplessly as their lands were overrun. But even the darkest shadows cannot last forever. In the face of this unrelenting terror, the gods called upon the supreme force, the goddess Durga. She was no mere deity, she was the embodiment of divine wrath, a force of nature unlike any other. When she appeared on the battlefield, her form was like a storm, unpredictable, unstoppable, and terrifying. Durga's arrival was like a sudden flash of lightning that split the sky. She wielded a weapon in each hand, her eyes burning with the fire of vengeance. The earth seemed to tremble beneath her feet as she stepped forward, her very presence commanding the winds to bow. But the demons, Chanda and Munda, would not be cowed. They saw her as just another challenge, another enemy to defeat. The gods may have sent her, but they would not fear her. The two demons, with their sinister grins, rushed forward to meet Durga in battle. Chanda, wielding a massive sword, charged first, his eyes filled with hatred. He swung his weapon with all his might, hoping to land a blow that would bring the goddess to her knees. But Durga, swift and graceful, dodged his strike with ease. She was not just a warrior, she was the force of justice, and no evil could stand against her. Munda, not to be outdone, followed with a volley of dark magic, summoning black clouds to obscure the sun. The sky turned a sickly shade of green as bolts of lightning shot across the heavens. Yet, Durga stood unfazed, her golden armor gleaming even in the darkest storm. She raised her weapons high, and with a battle cry that echoed across the mountains, she cut through the darkness with a single strike. But it was not just her strength that made her invincible, it was her unyielding determination, her unwavering belief in the power of good. As Chanda and Munda attacked again and again, the goddess stood her ground. She fought not just for victory, but for the restoration of balance in the world. Her every strike was filled with the fury of 1,000 storms, her every movement a testament to her divine power. The battle was not just one of physical strength, it was a clash of ideals, of light versus darkness, of righteousness versus evil. Chanda and Munda, however, were relentless. They had fought their way through countless battles, and they had never been defeated. But they had underestimated the fury of Durga. Her resolve was not one that could be broken. She was not just fighting for herself, she was fighting for the earth, for the sky, for the very soul of the universe. As the battle raged on, Durga's movements became a blur, her strikes landing with the precision of a goddess whose power knew no bounds. It was not long before Chanda, the first to charge, found himself lying on the ground, his sword shattered, his body broken. He let out a guttural cry, a desperate plea for help, but none came. He had been consumed by the very wrath he had unleashed. The light of life faded from his eyes, and the earth itself seemed to sigh in relief. One demon down, but Munda still stood. Munda, now filled with fury, attacked with even greater ferocity. His body was covered in wounds, his energy drained, but his rage only grew stronger. He was determined not to be the next to fall. With a roar, he lunged at Durga, his claws reaching for her throat. But Durga, swift and deadly, caught his arm midair. Her eyes blazed as she twisted his arm, forcing him to his knees. "Munda," she said, her voice cold as ice, "you dared to challenge the gods, to bring ruin upon the world. Now, you will face the consequences of your actions." With a final cry, she drove her spear into Munda's heart, and the world seemed to pause. The wind stilled. The storm clouds dispersed. And the earth seemed to take a collective breath. The two demons, Chanda and Munda, who had once seemed invincible, lay defeated before her. Durga stood over their fallen bodies, her eyes reflecting not just victory, but a deep sadness. She had destroyed what they had become, but it had never been her desire to kill. It had been their own darkness, their own wrath, that had brought them to this end. In her heart, she knew that they were not born evil, they had simply chosen the wrong path. And so, as their bodies lay in the dirt, she wept for them. The world, for the moment, was safe. The wrath of Chanda and Munda had been extinguished, and the goddess had once again restored balance. But the tale of these two demons would live on, a reminder of what happens when one dares to challenge the divine, and a testament to the power of justice, wrath, and redemption. The full moon hung high, its light casting long shadows across the forest floor, a silver glow seeping through the canopy above. It was a quiet night, the kind where the world seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The rustle of leaves was barely audible, a whispering prelude to something far darker. Suddenly, the silence shattered as a growl echoed through the trees, a deep, guttural sound that sent a chill to the very marrow of the bones. From the darkness, something stirred. In Indian mythology, such creatures were not mere stories told to frighten children at bedtime. They were real, ancient beings whose forms flickered in the half-light between man and beast, cursed or transformed by the will of the gods or their own fate. Werewolves, were-tigers, and creatures of the night, shapeshifters were legends woven into the fabric of India's mythical past. The terrifying notion of a human being, someone you might have known or loved, twisting into a creature of fury and hunger, was a fear that had gripped the hearts of many. One such legend spoke of a man who had been cursed by a vengeful sage. This man, once a proud warrior, was condemned to transform under the light of the full moon. Every night, as the moon rose, his bones would stretch and shift, his senses heightening, his mind clouded with an uncontrollable hunger. His body, once human, was now that of a massive, snarling beast, a terror to all who crossed his path. With each transformation, the man would lose more of himself, his humanity slipping further away. He would wake in the morning, his hands drenched in blood, his clothes torn, and his mind haunted by the screams of those he had harmed. This was the curse of the shapeshifter, a brutal war between man and beast, a battle of wills fought each time the moonlight bathed the earth. The man had once been a protector of his village, but now, he was the very thing they feared. He could never escape his fate, trapped in a cycle of violence he could never remember, nor control. The villagers, once his friends, now feared him. They knew that the monster that stalked the night could be none other than the man they had once trusted. And yet, there was a strange sympathy in their hearts. For no one knew better than them the agony of this curse. To see a loved one turned into something else, something monstrous, and still hold the flicker of hope that the man who had once been kind would someday return. But with each passing moon, that hope grew weaker. The beast that haunted the night was slowly erasing the man who had once been. Then there were the were-tigers, creatures born from the curse of a fallen rishi, a sage who had once sought wisdom but instead found madness. Transformed into a terrible half-man, half-tiger hybrid, this creature stalked the jungles of India, a nightmare that preyed on anyone foolish enough to wander too deep into the wilderness. This tiger man was different, though. It wasn't just his monstrous form that terrified the villagers, it was his ability to weave between worlds, shifting from human to beast with a fluidity that made it impossible to track him. At times, he would appear as a man, beautiful and charming, speaking words of comfort, drawing people into his trust. They would walk with him, unaware that beneath his human skin, the beast was waiting, always watching. When the night fell and the moon rose, the curse would take hold, and he would tear into his prey with the ferocity of a wild animal. The man would be gone, leaving only the tiger, a creature whose eyes burned with an ancient rage, whose claws could tear through flesh as if it were paper. But it wasn't always an outward curse. Some legends spoke of men who sought the power to change form themselves, to slip into the skin of an animal and roam the earth free of human constraints. These were the darker tales, the ones whispered around campfires, the stories of men so desperate for power that they would go to any lengths to achieve it. The transformation would often come with a price, perhaps their soul, perhaps their sanity. They would slip into the body of a wolf, a bear, or a snake, becoming creatures that lived only to hunt, to feed, and to survive. Once a man, now nothing more than a shadow of his former self. One such man was a young prince, foolish and hungry for power. He had heard of an ancient ritual, a secret that would allow him to assume the form of any creature, to live as a god among men. He performed the ritual, but what he did not know was that the magic he invoked was twisted, corrupt. Instead of transforming into a powerful creature, he became something else, something monstrous. His body contorted and changed, but his mind was locked in the struggle between man and beast. Each night, he would change into a tiger, a wild beast that hunted the very people he had once vowed to protect. In the quiet of the forest, he would prowl through the shadows, his eyes glowing with the hunger of a predator. But within him, there was a spark of humanity, a shred of the prince he had once been, trapped inside the beast. He would return to the palace each morning, covered in blood, only to stare at the reflection of his cursed form in the water. His people feared him, his own family turned away from him, and even the gods looked on with pity, for they knew the curse would never be undone. The moon, in these tales, was never just a symbol of time. It was a trigger, a harbinger of darkness, a reminder that beneath every calm, every peaceful face, there might lie a beast waiting to be unleashed. The legends of shapeshifters in Indian mythology tell us that power, once sought in the pursuit of greatness, often comes with a terrible price. And in the end, it is not the body that changes, but the soul that is lost. The tales of these creatures, these men who were caught between the human and the animal, resonate with the deepest fears of all, fear of losing control, of becoming something unrecognizable, of the darkness that lies just beneath the surface. They remind us that even the most noble of men can fall victim to their desires, and that sometimes, the monster we fear the most is the one that lives inside us all. The winds howled through the dense forest, an eerie whisper that seemed to call from the darkest corners of the earth. In the shadows, something moved, flickers of light cast over twisted trees, the moon barely breaking through the thick canopy. There was a presence here, a weight in the air that didn't belong. It was the curse that followed these woods like a shadow, unseen, but never far away. The Yakshas, once mighty beings, now twisted forms of their former selves, roamed the land, bound by the consequences of their actions. These were not simple creatures, they were guardians, spirits of nature, protectors of treasures and hidden secrets. But what happens when you anger the gods, when you betray the very nature you were sworn to protect? The story of the Yakshas curse begins in a time long ago, when these beings lived in harmony with the world around them, worshipped and respected for their power. Among them was a Yaksha known for his strength and beauty, a being who could command the winds and shape the land itself. But like many before him, pride and arrogance crept into his heart. His greed for more, his thirst for greater power, led him to defy the gods. The gods, who had watched his rise with growing concern, were not merciful. They were patient, but not forgiving. And so, in the dead of night, when the stars themselves seemed to turn away in dismay, they cast their judgment. The Yaksha's body began to twist and contort, his limbs stretching and breaking. His once majestic form, a figure that had inspired awe and fear, was now a grotesque shadow of what it had been. His beauty was gone, replaced by hideous features, claws that could tear through stone, eyes that glowed with an unnatural light. He was no longer the mighty being he once was, he had become a monster, an outcast from both the world of men and the divine. But the curse didn't stop with this Yaksha. There were others, each carrying a story of pride, defiance, or betrayal. Some had sought to steal the treasures of the gods, others had tried to challenge the divine order itself. All of them had fallen victim to the same wrath, transformed into creatures too terrible to behold. Some were turned into monstrous serpents, their bodies winding and slithering through the earth like shadows. Others became grotesque forms of half-human, half-beast, their monstrous bodies moving with terrifying speed and agility. Their features were twisted beyond recognition, their minds fractured by the curse that bound them. As time passed, the Yakshas became little more than legends, whispers of creatures that haunted the deepest parts of the earth, their names spoken only in fear. Travelers would speak of hearing their growls echoing through the forests, of seeing their glowing eyes peering out from the darkness. Some said that they could still hear the cries of the cursed Yakshas, their voices carrying on the wind, full of anguish and regret. There was a story of a Yaksha who had once guarded a hidden valley of unimaginable beauty. The flowers bloomed eternally there, the rivers sparkled with the purest water, and the trees were lush with fruits of every kind. It was a paradise, untouched by time. The Yaksha had lived there for centuries, ensuring that no harm came to the valley. But when a group of greedy men stumbled upon the valley, the Yiksha was tempted. He let them in, showing them the wonders of the land, hoping they would leave in peace. But the men, captivated by the wealth of the valley, turned on him. They sought to take what was not theirs. Enraged, the Yiksha fought back. In the struggle, the gods intervened, but not to protect the Yiksha. They cursed him, turning him into a giant, terrifying beast whose form could never again be seen by the light of day. He roamed the forest, his once beautiful valley lost to him, now a place of nightmares. Each night, as the full moon rose, his howls would echo across the land, a sound that chilled the bones of those who heard it. His once delicate nature was now gone, replaced by raw violence and hunger. The curse had twisted him, and in the end, it was no longer the Yiksha who roamed the earth, but a mindless monster driven only by rage and sorrow. But there was no escape from the curse. The gods had spoken, and their word was law. No matter how deeply the Yikshas regretted their actions, no matter how much they longed for their former lives, they were bound. The curse was not something that could be undone by prayer or by pleading, it was eternal. In the hearts of these cursed Yikshas, there remained a flicker of who they had been, wise, powerful, protectors of the land. But that spark grew dimmer with each passing year. They had been left to wander the earth in torment, trapped in their monstrous forms, unable to ever return to the light of their former glory. The pain of their transformation was not just physical. It was the anguish of knowing they would never again be whole. And yet, there was no rest for them. The curse was not only a punishment, it was a constant reminder of the mistakes they had made. They could not run from it, and they could not hide. Even in their darkest moments, the memories of what they once were would haunt them. There were those who claimed to hear the soft whispers of these lost souls, calling for release. But release never came. Instead, the Yikshas roamed, guardians of nothing but the hollow remnants of their past. Some said the Yikshas were doomed to wander for eternity, their suffering never to end. Others believed they would one day find redemption, a way to break free from their monstrous forms. But the gods, who had once looked upon them with favor, now turned their faces away. For now, the Yikshas remained, locked in their cursed existence, a tragic reminder of the consequences of pride, defiance, and betrayal. The forest remained their home, a dark and quiet place where their monstrous forms could roam freely, unseen by the eyes of men. But in the silence, in the stillness of the night, the truth was clear: the Yikshas were not mere monsters. They were lost souls, trapped in a nightmare of their own making, waiting for something, anything, that might end their torment. A chilling wind swept across the desolate land, howling through the empty night. In the darkness, there was a soft, almost imperceptible sound, a whisper, or perhaps a cry. The ground trembled as something stirred beneath it, something ancient and filled with sorrow. It was a sound like no other, the sound of a soul lost to its own deeds, trapped in the endless cycle of suffering. Karma, the cosmic law of cause and effect, never forgets. It watches, silent and patient, recording every action, every choice, no matter how small. And when the time is right, it exacts its justice. Some believe that the universe is kind, that good deeds will be rewarded and wrongs will be righted. But there is a darker side to karma, an unyielding force that, when betrayed, can twist a soul into something unrecognizable. There are tales, countless stories, of beings who have been reborn not into the life they once knew, but into the nightmare their own actions have created. These souls, having sown seeds of cruelty, pride, or greed in their previous lives, find themselves trapped in forms too hideous to bear. The lives they once lived seem like distant memories, ghosts of something they can never touch again. They are no longer human, no longer gods or angels, but creatures twisted by their own karmic debts. One such story speaks of a prince, once beloved by his people. In his heart, he was consumed by ambition, eager to claim a throne that was not his. He betrayed his family, destroyed those who stood in his way, and ruled with cruelty. But the price of his betrayal was steep. When he died, his soul did not ascend to the heavens, nor did it descend into the underworld. It was not granted peace or rest. Instead, he was reborn, not as a man, but as a monstrous serpent, coiled in the deepest pits of the earth. In his new form, the serpent could no longer speak the language of men or feel the warmth of the sun. All that remained was hunger, an insatiable hunger that could never be sated. His body writhed and twisted, the weight of his past sins dragging him deeper into the abyss. His mind, once sharp and filled with ambition, was clouded by the rage of his betrayal. His only purpose now was to exist, to slither through the dark places of the world, a creature of malice and despair. Every time he crossed paths with a man, he would feel a strange echo, as though the memories of his past life whispered through him. And in those moments, he would remember the love he had once known, the warmth of his family, the laughter of his people. But those memories were fleeting, vanishing as quickly as they came. What remained was the curse of his actions, his karmic debt, and the monstrous form that trapped him. But his story is not unique. There are countless others, beings who, because of their actions, are condemned to live lives of terror, locked in bodies they never asked for, never wanted. One of the most tragic tales is that of a mighty king who, in his arrogance, defied the gods themselves. He sought to challenge the divine order, to take what was not his to command. In his pride, he dismissed the warning signs, believing that he could bend the world to his will. When the gods intervened, they did not simply destroy him. They did not end his life in a single stroke. No, they gave him a fate far worse. The king was reborn, not as a powerful ruler, but as a monstrous, towering beast, a creature so terrifying that no one dared to approach him. His once majestic form was now a hulking mass of fury, covered in scales that reflected the twisted nature of his soul. His eyes, once full of ambition, now burned with hatred and sorrow. Each day, the king wandered the earth, a beast in search of something he could never have. He would try to speak, to communicate with the world around him, but his words were lost in a guttural growl. He was an outcast, an embodiment of the karmic punishment he had brought upon himself. Every moment of his existence was a reminder of the choices he had made, choices that had led him into this nightmarish form. And so it went, souls reborn into monstrous shapes, their bodies reflecting the darkness of their past actions. Some were reborn as terrifying creatures of the night, giant, shadowy forms with eyes that glowed like fire, or beasts with claws that could tear through stone. Others found themselves trapped in forms that mirrored their inner demons, a heart of stone, a body of flesh, and a mind consumed by anger, jealousy, or greed. But perhaps the most tragic part of these karmic rebirths is the realization that there is no escape. The creatures that once were men or gods are bound to their monstrous forms for eternity, unable to change, unable to return to what they once were. Their punishment is their own making, a reflection of the choices they made in their previous lives, choices that led them down a path they could never turn away from. They are trapped, not just by the physical form they now wear, but by the weight of their past. The curse of their actions lingers with them, wrapping around their hearts and minds like a dark shroud. Every step they take, every movement they make, is a reminder of the karmic law that governs their existence. They can never escape it. In the quiet moments, when the wind is still and the earth is calm, these beings may feel the flicker of who they once were. The king may remember the warmth of his throne, the serpent may recall the days when he was revered. But those moments are fleeting, passing like a shadow at dawn. The creatures they have become cannot be undone, for the karma that binds them is as old as time itself. As the years pass, their forms may change, their appearances may shift, but the truth remains, they are cursed to be what they are, bound by the choices they made in a past life. And as they wander the earth, their footsteps heavy with the weight of their sins, they are reminded that karma does not forgive. In the stillness of the night, the world shifts. The moonlight dances across the landscape, casting eerie shadows that stretch and bend in unnatural ways. A figure emerges from the mist, its form twisting and warping with every step it takes. Is it real? Or is it an illusion, a figment of a mind lost in the grip of terror? The lines between what is true and what is false blur, and the world becomes a place where monsters are born not from flesh and bone, but from the very fabric of reality itself. Maya, the illusion. It is a force that bends the world, twisting the senses, and weaving a web of lies that trap the unwary. In ancient tales, there are creatures born not from nature, but from the mind. Crafted by sorcery, they are projections of fear, created to deceive and destroy. These creatures live in the spaces between truth and lie, between dream and reality, and their power lies in their ability to make you question what you know. There was once a kingdom, nestled in the mountains, where the people lived in constant fear. Strange things had begun to happen. A man would go out to the fields in the morning, only to return to find that everything around him had changed. A path that once led home now twisted into a dark forest, filled with whispering voices. A river that had always flowed clear became thick with mud, pulling anyone who dared approach into its depths. But the strangest of all were the creatures, the monsters, that seemed to appear out of nowhere. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, a great roar shook the ground. The people ran in terror, but when they turned to look, there was nothing to be seen. It wasn't until the next day that they realized what had happened. The forest had changed. Where once there had been tall trees, now there stood monstrous, writhing shapes, their eyes glowing with a terrible hunger. But these were not real creatures, they were creations of the mind, born from the twisted illusions of a sorcerer's curse. The sorcerer, a man who had delved too deep into the mysteries of magic, had sought to master the power of Maya. With a word, he could change the very nature of reality. But in doing so, he created beings that were not bound by the rules of the world. They were neither flesh nor spirit, neither alive nor dead. They existed only in the space between, terrifying and incomprehensible. One such creature was the Rakshasa, a demon born from the mind of the sorcerer, crafted to haunt the edges of the kingdom. It took the form of a great beast, its body massive and covered in scales like the skin of a serpent. Its eyes were empty voids, and its mouth was a cavern that could swallow the stars themselves. But when the people saw it, it was never truly there. At first, they saw it as a shadow lurking at the edge of the village, a flicker of movement in the corner of their eyes. As they approached, it would vanish, only to reappear again, closer and closer, until the fear itself would consume them. The Maya Bhakta, a creature born from pure fear, would stand in front of the villagers, its form flickering like smoke. It was a nightmare, a reflection of their own fears. It would change shape before their very eyes, first a man, then a wolf, then a bird of prey, and then back to a monstrous thing with gaping jaws. Each time it appeared, it brought with it a sense of dread so deep that the villagers could hardly breathe. And the creature would feed on that fear, growing stronger, its presence more unbearable with each passing moment. But even as these monsters of illusion terrified the kingdom, no one knew how to fight them. How do you fight something that isn't even real? How do you face a monster that exists only in the mind? The people tried everything they could think of, swords, fire, magic, but nothing worked. The creatures simply melted into the air, slipping through their fingers like smoke, and reappeared somewhere else, always just out of reach. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the people began to lose hope. They wondered if they were all doomed to live in a world where nothing was as it seemed. What was real? Was the ground beneath their feet solid, or was it just another illusion? Was the sky above them truly blue, or was it a painted canvas, waiting to collapse? The true horror of these creatures, these monsters of Maya, was not that they could tear flesh or destroy cities. It was that they could make you question everything you thought you knew. They would warp the very fabric of reality, twisting the world into a place of nightmares. In the end, the greatest terror they brought was not the monsters themselves, but the fear that nothing was truly real. One night, when the kingdom was on the brink of despair, a lone warrior emerged. She was a woman with no magic, no illusions, no sorcery to rely on, just a heart filled with courage. She entered the heart of the forest, where the monsters were said to reside, and there, she met the Rakshasa. But instead of drawing her sword, she simply closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. She accepted that the monsters were not real, that they were only the result of the sorcerer's power. She faced them not with force, but with understanding. And in that moment, the Rakshasa faltered. It flickered, then vanished. The Maya, the illusion, dissolved. It was then that the people realized the true nature of these monsters. They were not creatures to be slain. They were not beasts to be feared. They were nothing more than projections, illusions. They could only exist as long as they were feared. The power they held was not in their form, but in the terror they inspired. And when the people stopped fearing them, they ceased to exist. But that knowledge came too late for many. The creatures of Maya had already taken their toll. Some villagers had already lost their minds to the madness of uncertainty. Others had been driven to despair by the constant shifting of reality. But the warrior's bravery had shown them that the greatest monster of all is not the one that lurks in the shadows, but the one that feeds on the fear within us. The sorcerer's illusions were broken, but the scars they left behind would never fade. The monsters of Maya had not just terrorized the body, but had twisted the very nature of reality itself, leaving a lasting mark on the world. A mark that reminded everyone that the greatest terror is not the monster you can see, but the one you can't escape. The one that lives in your mind. The wind howls through the cracks in the old village hut, carrying with it the whispers of a time long past. In the flickering firelight, the shadows stretch, growing taller and darker as the old storyteller begins to speak. His voice, raspy and full of age, trembles slightly but holds the weight of 1,000 untold secrets. As he spins his tale, the children lean in, their wide eyes reflecting the glow of the fire, hungry for the stories that have survived through generations. Long ago, he begins, his voice low and mysterious, there were creatures that roamed the earth, monsters who were feared and revered, their stories etched into the very fabric of our history. But these are not just tales to frighten children. No, these are the legends that have been passed down through the ages, surviving in every whisper of the wind, every rustle of the trees, and every shadow that creeps into the night. The children fall silent, as if holding their breath, waiting for the tale to unfold. From the mountains of the north to the coastal villages in the south, monsters have lurked in the corners of Indian folk tales. They are not always the terrifying beasts of nightmares, but sometimes tricksters, creatures who challenge the boundaries of good and evil, who push the limits of what is possible and what is forbidden. These monsters have endured, traveling from one generation to the next, their forms shifting with time, but their essence remaining the same. In one village, there's a tale of a demon that comes from the dark forest. Known as the Vetala, this creature is neither fully alive nor fully dead. It is a restless spirit that has taken possession of a dead body, wandering the night, hungry for the souls of the living. But this is not just a mindless monster, it is cunning, often engaging in riddles and challenges, using its intelligence to torment those who dare to encounter it. The Vetala is more than just a being of terror, it is a reminder that death and life are not always as they seem, and that the line between the two is as thin as a shadow. But not all monsters are evil. In another part of India, there is the Naga, a serpent-like creature that has been both feared and worshipped for centuries. The Naga is said to dwell in the depths of rivers and lakes, its long, sinuous body slipping through the water like a whisper. Some say it guards treasures hidden beneath the surface, while others claim it brings misfortune to those who cross its path. Yet, there are those who tell of the Naga as a protector, a guardian of sacred waters and ancient knowledge. In these tales, the Naga is not a mindless monster, but a creature bound by duty and honor, its role in the world as much about balance as it is about fear. And then there are the stories of the Rakshasas, demons who are as varied as the stars in the sky. Some Rakshasas are brutal, fierce, and bent on destruction, while others are clever and manipulative, using their powers to deceive and confuse. The Rakshasas are shapeshifters, able to change their form at will, appearing as beautiful women or wise sages, only to reveal their true monstrous selves when the time is right. These creatures are both terrifying and captivating, a symbol of the hidden dangers that lie just beneath the surface of the world we know. In the far-flung corners of the country, the Churel lurks, a ghostly figure with a face twisted in agony, her body that of a woman but her feet turned backward, a sure sign of her curse. She is said to appear at night, luring unsuspecting travelers to their doom. Her beauty is deceiving, and those who are seduced by it find themselves trapped in her spell, unable to escape. The Churel is a reminder of the dangers of beauty and desire, a force that turns love and attraction into something dark and deadly. Even in the villages nestled in the hills, stories are told of the Pikal Peri, a ghostly woman who haunts the crossroads. In her stories, she is never the villain, but always the victim, her tragic fate woven into the fabric of her existence. She is a warning to those who wander too far from the safety of home, a reminder that sometimes the past never truly leaves us, and that the spirits of those who have been wronged will continue to walk among the living, seeking justice or revenge. These monsters live on not only in the stories of the old, but in the songs and ballads of the people. The melodies that echo through the villages are filled with tales of creatures who bring both terror and wonder. The songs carry the essence of the monsters, their spirits embedded in every note and every word. The Asuras, the demonic forces that are the eternal enemies of the gods, are celebrated and reviled in the same breath, their stories sung by wandering minstrels who know that the boundaries between good and evil are not always clear. The Vetala, the spirit that haunts the bodies of the dead, is another creature that has lived on in these ancient ballads. These undead guardians challenge the minds of the wise and the brave, offering riddles and puzzles that must be solved or face a terrible consequence. The Vetala teaches a simple lesson, that life and death are not fixed, and that the mysteries of existence can never truly be understood. As the old storyteller's voice fades into the night, there is a hush in the air, as if the very world is holding its breath. The children, wide-eyed and enraptured, sit still, the images of the monsters swirling in their minds, each one a flicker of fear and wonder. These stories will live on in their hearts, passed down to their children, and to their children's children, each generation adding its own twist to the tale, but never straying too far from the monsters of old. For these monsters, born of illusion, fear, and desire, have lived through time, evolving and adapting, but always carrying with them the same dark power. The power to remind us that the world is not always as it seems, that monsters can be born not from the physical world, but from the shadows of our minds. And no matter how much time passes, no matter how much the world changes, these monsters will continue to live on, alive in the hearts of those who remember them, and in the stories that keep them alive. In the dead of night, beneath the faint moonlight, the British explorers huddled around a campfire on the edge of the Indian jungle. Their faces, hardened by the long months of travel, betrayed a mixture of fascination and fear. Their ears strained at the sounds around them, the rustle of leaves, the distant calls of animals, the unsettling silence that had fallen upon the jungle. But it wasn't the jungle's creatures that filled their minds with dread. It was the stories they had heard. Stories of monstrous beings that roamed the land, their terrifying forms and powers beyond comprehension. The British writers who followed in their footsteps captured these tales with a mix of skepticism and awe, their pens racing to record the lore of creatures that had been passed down through generations of Indians. The jungle, they wrote, was home to gods, demons, and spirits that could not be understood by the minds of civilized men. It was a world where reality and fantasy merged, where ancient creatures hid in the shadows, and where danger seemed to lurk in every corner. One such tale that caught the imagination of these explorers was the legend of the Rakshasas, shape-shifting demons that could take on any form, from a beautiful woman to a terrifying beast. The British chroniclers, intrigued by the stories they had heard, described these creatures as embodiments of pure evil, lurking in the forests and preying on the unsuspecting. They wrote of the Rakshasas as malevolent forces that sought to bring chaos to the world, their true forms revealed only in moments of extreme violence or deceit. What the explorers didn't understand was that these monsters weren't just figments of superstition. They were warnings, manifestations of human vices, the greed, lust, and hatred that could turn any soul monstrous if left unchecked. Then there was the tale of the Naga, the serpentine creatures that lived in the waters and mountains, believed to possess both beauty and danger. To the British, these stories were nothing more than curious myths, with their descriptions of half-human, half-serpent beings seeming too fantastical to believe. But there was something about the Naga that fascinated them, something that hinted at a deeper mystery. These creatures, they noted, were revered by the locals, their powers thought to control the waters and the fertility of the earth. What the British failed to grasp was that the Naga were not mere monsters, they were symbols of the delicate balance between man and nature, the forces of creation and destruction that resided in every living being. The British accounts were often filled with fear and misunderstanding. They wrote of the Vetala, a vampire-like creature that inhabited dead bodies, possessing them and using them to haunt the living. The British saw this as nothing more than an odd superstition, dismissing it as the product of primitive minds. But they could not shake the feeling that there was something deeply unsettling about the Vetala, a creature born of death, yet forever caught between life and the afterlife. The Vetala was a reminder of the impermanence of existence, a symbol of the inescapable truth that no one, no matter how powerful, could outrun death. One explorer, in his journal, described a harrowing encounter with a Bhairava, a spirit that inhabited a corpse and would torment its victim with riddles. He spoke of the bone-chilling fear that gripped him as the creature's eyes glowed in the dark, its voice echoing with the sound of death itself. He wrote that the Bhairava was a demon that preyed on the minds of men, testing their intelligence and patience, revealing the flaws in their souls. To the British, the Bhairava was nothing more than a supernatural trickster, a creature that thrived on fear. But beneath that surface, the Bhairava was more than just a monster. It was a reflection of human folly, a reminder that intelligence alone could not save you from the darker aspects of life. As these British explorers ventured deeper into India, they began to encounter other monstrous tales that seemed to blur the line between reality and myth. The Churel, a female ghost with backward feet, was said to appear at night, luring men to their doom. The explorers recorded their encounters with a sense of fascination, describing the Churel as a beautiful woman who would transform into a hideous monster once she had lured her prey. The British saw this as another example of superstition, a creature that existed only in the minds of the villagers. But what they failed to see was that the Churel symbolized something much darker, the consequences of betrayal, the power of revenge, and the idea that love could transform into something monstrous when corrupted. In the remote villages, the British writers heard whispers of a beast known as the Pishachas, a woman whose tragic death at the hands of her lover turned her into a wandering ghost. Her story was one of heartbreak and betrayal, a woman wronged by those she loved, now cursed to roam the earth forever. The British chroniclers were struck by the sorrow in the tale, though they dismissed it as another eerie superstition. What they could not see was that the Pishachas was more than just a ghost. It was the living embodiment of grief, a spirit that had been broken by betrayal, its pain eternal and unyielding. As the British continued their exploration, they could not help but write about the strange and terrifying monsters they encountered in India. But in their accounts, they missed the deeper meaning behind these creatures. The monsters were not just stories to frighten children or fill the pages of books. They were living symbols of the human condition, of love and loss, of betrayal and revenge, of life and death. The monsters of India were not merely creatures of the dark, but reflections of the fears, desires, and emotions that shaped the very fabric of human existence. In the end, the British explorers were left with more questions than answers. They had come to India seeking to understand its people, its culture, and its history, but what they found were creatures that defied explanation. These monsters, born of ancient myths and legends, had lived for centuries, surviving not just in the jungles and villages, but in the hearts and minds of the people. The British could record their encounters, but they would never fully understand the monsters of India, not because the creatures themselves were so mysterious, but because the monsters were reflections of the very souls of those who told the tales. And in that, perhaps, lay their greatest terror. The cold wind howls through the mountains, carrying with it the eerie whispers of something ancient and unseen. High in the snow-covered peaks, where the earth touches the sky, the stories of the Yeti linger. Not just stories told by those who have ventured too close to the Himalayan wilderness, but tales that have reached the far corners of the world. From the darkness of caves to the glimmer of a distant movie screen, the Yeti and other Himalayan monsters have taken on a life of their own in popular culture. These creatures, born from ancient folklore, have been transformed into icons of mystery, fear, and wonder. But in the world of pop culture, do they still hold the same terror, or have they been molded into something else entirely? In the chilly silence of the mountains, a figure is spotted from the corner of an eye, massive, covered in white fur, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly presence. The legend of the Yeti has been around for centuries, whispered by those who claim to have seen its footprints in the snow or heard its haunting cries echoing through the frozen forests. But in the age of films, TV shows, and books, the Yeti's image has changed. No longer a terrifying force of nature, it has become a symbol of adventure, mystery, and even comedy. In movies, the Yeti has been portrayed as both a terrifying monster and a misunderstood creature. Take the abominable snowman from the 1950s, where the Yeti was an almost monstrous figure, its sheer size and power leaving a trail of fear in its wake. People spoke of it in hushed tones, eyes wide with dread, the very mention of its name sending shivers down spines. And then there was the Yeti in Monsters Incorporated, a giant furry creature whose roar turned into a source of comic relief. It is as if this great beast, once feared for its strength and danger, had softened into something more approachable, even lovable. This transformation didn't happen overnight. In the past, the Yeti was a force of nature, something to fear and respect. Ancient accounts told of the Yeti as a guardian of the mountains, powerful, relentless in its quest to remain hidden from the world. The early explorers who ventured into the Himalayan range spoke of encountering strange, massive footprints in the snow, far too large and perfectly formed to belong to any known animal. These reports, fueled by the mysteries of the unknown, captured imaginations around the world. As more and more Western eyes gazed upon the Himalayas, the Yeti became a creature not just of terror but of fascination. Its existence seemed tantalizing, a piece of nature too elusive to grasp fully, yet close enough to dream of. But as time passed, and as Western media took hold of the Yeti myth, the creature morphed. It was no longer a shadowy, terrifying being lurking in the cold wilderness. Now, the Yeti had friends, like in the 2015 movie Smallfoot, where the creature was portrayed as a gentle giant, misunderstood by the human world. In this portrayal, the Yeti was not a creature of death but of curiosity, a guardian of wisdom, seeking to live peacefully with others. Suddenly, it wasn't the Yeti who instilled fear, it was the people who refused to understand it. Here was a new kind of monster, a creature that, instead of destroying, sought to connect, to teach, and to bridge worlds that were worlds apart. But why did these monsters of folklore lose their frightening edge? Perhaps it's because modern media needs monsters that are easier to approach, easier to empathize with. After all, in an age where films and stories are created not just to scare but to entertain and inspire, the ancient figure of the Yeti had to undergo a change. Monsters in pop culture no longer exist to haunt us in the same way. Now, they have personalities, histories, and sometimes, a desire for friendship. The monstrous Yeti, once the embodiment of primal fear, became more like an innocent giant, misunderstood but loved in the right circumstances. In television and literature, these Himalayan creatures also took on a different form. No longer just the stuff of nightmarish dreams, they were given life stories. The Yeti Chronicles became a tale of discovery, of understanding the complexities of a creature so misunderstood, so feared, that its true nature remained hidden for centuries. It was no longer just about the fear of the unknown, but the slow peeling back of layers to reveal a creature not so different from us. The Yeti was no longer just a cold, savage beast, but something capable of thought, emotions, and even compassion. Yet, despite these changes, traces of the old terror still persist. The Yeti's legacy in pop culture is not without its darker moments. Films like Abominable and The Legend of the Yeti still paint the creature in the shadows, its massive presence looming as it quietly stalks its prey, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. In these stories, the Yeti remains a powerful figure, an ancient force who exists beyond the understanding of modern man. In these instances, the monster remains an unsettling reminder that there are things in the world we may never truly understand. Even though it may be misunderstood or even domesticated in certain tales, at its heart, the Yeti still represents a world where nature rules, and man is insignificant in comparison. The transformation of Himalayan monsters in pop culture is more than just a shift in how they're portrayed, it speaks to the changing relationship between humanity and the unknown. In ancient times, monsters were terrifying because they represented the forces of nature that could not be tamed. They were mysteries that humanity could never conquer. In modern times, monsters like the Yeti have become symbols not of fear but of adventure and discovery. As humanity seeks to understand the world around it, these ancient creatures have been repurposed, no longer forces of destruction but beings of wisdom, compassion, and intrigue. Yet, Even as the Yeti softens in the minds of modern audiences, it remains a reminder of the wild, untamed nature of the earth and the mountains where it lives. No matter how many films try to humanize it or make it a creature of comedy, the Yeti still carries a weight, a history that cannot be erased. It is, in the end, a creature born from the shadows, a symbol of all the things that remain beyond human comprehension. And in that strange, complex dance between fear and fascination, between terror and tenderness, the Yeti continues to captivate. It is no longer just a monster. It is a story, a myth that continues to evolve, shift, and haunt, as timeless as the snow-covered peaks where it lives. The night was thick with darkness, and the wind howled through the trees like the cries of something long lost. In the distance, the flicker of torchlight barely broke the shadows, where fear and hope met in the hearts of those brave enough to stand at the edge of the unknown. There was a monster, one so terrifying, so savage, that it had left a trail of destruction in its wake, causing villages to tremble, and even the strongest warriors to turn away. But there were those who did not flinch, those who did not cower in the face of such terror. Heroes, sages, monster hunters. These weren't just stories of battle. They were tales of unshakable resolve, of quiet wisdom, and fierce courage. Heroes who, armed with nothing but their faith, wit, and weapons crafted by the gods themselves, confronted beasts that would turn any man into a trembling wreck. And though they were human, they fought like gods. Not for glory or fame, but for the greater good, for the survival of those they loved, and for a world that seemed to crumble beneath the weight of darkness. One such hero was the great sage, Agastya, a name that still echoes through the halls of history. Legends say he once faced a Rakshasa called Vetala, a monster of nightmarish proportions, whose very gaze could send any mortal to madness. Vetala had been terrorizing the land, hiding in caves and attacking without warning. No one could defeat him. The bravest warriors had all fallen, their swords shattered and their courage scattered like dust. But Agastya, though small in stature, was a giant in wisdom. He knew that it wasn't just strength that could defeat this beast, it was the power of the mind. He faced the Rakshasa in the dead of night, armed not with a sword, but with a calm mind and the blessing of his divine knowledge. As Vetala roared with fury, Agastya remained unmoved. The beast, sensing his tranquility, grew agitated. It charged forward, but Agastya's words were more powerful than any blade. He spoke the ancient mantra that could silence the greatest of creatures, and with each word, Vetala faltered, until, finally, the Rakshasa fell to the ground, defeated not by violence, but by the unshakable force of a wise heart. Then there was the mighty Parshurama, the warrior sage who was born to end the tyranny of monsters and demons. His father, Agni, had been murdered by a cruel king, and from the depths of grief and fury, Parshurama rose. He wielded the axe given to him by Lord Shiva himself, a weapon so sharp, so divine, it could cleave through mountains. Parshurama's quest was one of vengeance, yes, but it was also one of justice. Armed with his axe, Parshurama went on to rid the world of kings who had turned into tyrants, slaying demons that had terrorized villages, and even confronting the dreaded demon king, Kartavirya Arjuna, who had held the land in an iron grip. The tales of his battles were legends in their own right. With his axe, Parshurama smote the earth, causing the rivers to rise and the sky to crack with thunder. Each swing of his weapon brought a storm of destruction, yet it was never done out of malice. He was a hero, but he was also a sage, a man who understood that true strength was not in how many demons he could slay, but in how he could restore balance to the world. In the dense forests of India, where the trees whispered ancient secrets, there was another hero, Rama, the prince of Ayodhya, who faced the monstrous Ravana. Ravana, a demon king of immense power and intelligence, had kidnapped Rama's wife, Sita, and taken her to his island kingdom of Lanka. What followed was not just a war of armies, but a war of wits, courage, and sheer determination. Rama did not fight Ravana just with his bow and arrows. He fought him with strategy, understanding the depths of Ravana's power and weaknesses. Every step was calculated, every arrow released with precision. With the help of his loyal ally Hanuman, Rama crossed the vast ocean to Lanka, where he faced Ravana in the final battle. The sky darkened, and the ground trembled as the two titans clashed. But it was not just physical strength that won the battle. It was Rama's understanding of what Ravana truly feared, his ego, his pride. In the end, it was not just the weapon of war that defeated Ravana, but the weapon of wisdom. Rama's unshakable resolve, his knowledge of Dharma, and his refusal to let his emotions cloud his judgment were what ultimately led to Ravana's fall. There were others too, heroes who walked the earth, their stories passed down through generations like a whisper in the wind. Some carried weapons gifted by the gods, others carried only their courage and determination. Each had a role to play in the great balance between good and evil. They were monster hunters, but not in the way we imagine today. They didn't hunt for sport, nor for fame. They hunted to restore peace, to protect the weak, and to remind the world that even in the face of unspeakable darkness, there was light. These heroes used more than just weapons. They used their knowledge of the universe, the divine mantras that could shake the very foundations of the world. They understood that the monsters they faced were not just beasts, they were the embodiment of chaos, darkness, and fear. And to defeat them, one needed more than just physical power. They needed the strength of the mind, the clarity of purpose, and the guidance of the gods themselves. But the most powerful weapon these ancient monster hunters wielded was their unshakable faith. Whether it was the faith of Agastya, who trusted in the power of wisdom over violence, or Rama, whose belief in Dharma guided him through his darkest moments, these heroes knew that the monsters they faced were not invincible. They knew that no matter how fierce the beast, no matter how terrifying the demon, there was always a way to overcome. And that way was not through sheer force, but through balance, faith, and the unwavering belief that good would always triumph over evil. The stories of these ancient heroes, these monster hunters, have survived the passage of time because they teach us something essential about the human spirit. They remind us that in the face of overwhelming fear, there is always a way forward. Whether armed with divine weapons or armed only with courage, these heroes show us that the fight against the darkness is not one of brute strength, but of heart. And in that fight, we all have the power to become heroes in our own way. The night is still, but the air is thick with something unspoken. You hear a rustle, a snap of branches, and then a shadow moves, impossibly large, just beyond your sight. Your heart pounds, and your breath catches in your throat. What is it? A nightmare come to life? A creature from the depths of fear itself? You don't know, but you feel it. The darkness has a shape. It has a face. It has teeth. It has claws. Monsters. These beings, born from our collective imagination, take on forms both terrifying and tragic. They lurk in the farthest corners of our consciousness, reflections of the fears that keep us awake at night. But what do they truly represent? Are they merely the stuff of legend, or do they embody something far deeper, something that speaks directly to the human soul? Every time a monster appears in myth or story, it feels like an echo of something primal, something we can't quite name but feel in the marrow of our bones. The Rakshasas, demons of legend, are more than creatures of chaos. They symbolize the darkness that exists in every human heart, the part of us that craves power, domination, and destruction. These monsters are born from selfishness, from the corruption of the soul. They are not just killers, they are the embodiment of what happens when we lose ourselves to greed, hate, and pride. Take Ravana, the demon king, for example. Powerful, brilliant, yet filled with an insatiable lust for power, his story is a haunting reminder of how unchecked desire can lead to ruin. He was a king with everything, strength, wealth, knowledge, yet it was never enough. His arrogance, his inability to see beyond his own hunger, led to his downfall. Ravana is not just a monster of flesh and bone, he is the monster inside all of us that whispers, more, always more. Then there are the more subtle monsters, the ones that aren't easily seen. The ones that sneak into the corners of your mind and gnaw at your thoughts. They are the fears we don't want to face, the desires we'd rather not admit. The fear of being insignificant, the fear of failure, the fear of being alone. These invisible monsters hold us back, chaining us to a place of inaction and self-doubt. They lurk, waiting for the moment when we are most vulnerable, when our guard is down, and then they strike. But not all monsters are born from darkness. Some are the product of something more painful. Take, for instance, the story of the Rakshasas. Once noble spirits, they were cursed and transformed into terrifying creatures. Their monstrous forms are not just physical, they are a reflection of their inner torment. These creatures represent the consequences of betrayal, of broken trust, of the pain that lingers when we hurt those who depend on us. Their very existence is a warning. What happens when we let bitterness consume us, when we refuse to forgive and hold on to our anger? And then there's the ultimate question, the one that haunts us all. What if the true monsters are the ones we create within ourselves? The stories of shapeshifters, of men who transform into beasts, speak directly to this. They show us that the line between good and evil is not as clear-cut as we like to think. Sometimes, the monster is not something outside of us, but something we carry within. It's the anger we can't let go of, the grudges we nurture, the parts of ourselves we refuse to face. These shapeshifters, trapped in a cycle of transformation, are the human psyche laid bare. A man may become a beast, but is he a monster because of what he has become, or because of the choices that led him there? The tragic beauty of these stories is that they ask us to look inward, to ask whether we, too, could be capable of monstrous deeds under the right, or wrong, circumstances. In every monster, there is a story, a reason for their existence. It's easy to label them as simply evil, as creatures to be feared, but that's only part of the truth. These monsters are also reflections of what happens when the best parts of humanity are lost: compassion, kindness, integrity. When those virtues are abandoned, something dark is born to fill the void. Whether it's a terrifying serpent like Ahi, or a monstrous beast created by magic, the monsters of Indian folklore aren't just there to frighten, they are there to teach. They show us what happens when we turn away from the path of righteousness, when we choose greed over kindness, destruction over peace. And in their defeat, we see another truth. Monsters don't always die by sword or by fire. Sometimes, they are vanquished when we choose to change, to face our fears, to confront the darkness inside ourselves and cast it out. Heroes and sages like Agastya and Parshurama didn't just fight physical beasts, they fought the very qualities that made those beasts possible. They fought arrogance, hatred, and the need for control. They fought not only for victory but for transformation, for a return to balance. The symbolism of monsters extends far beyond mere myth. These creatures speak to us about the delicate balance between light and darkness that resides in all of us. They remind us that our fears, our desires, and our values are all connected. We can choose to let our inner monsters consume us, or we can choose to face them, to understand them, and to grow from the struggle. The question is never whether monsters exist, but whether we allow them to shape our lives. Whether we let our fears fester into something monstrous or confront them with courage and resolve. In the end, these ancient stories, woven with fear and bravery, challenge us to ask ourselves, what is our greatest fear? What monsters lie within us, waiting to be unleashed? And most importantly, how do we rise above them? The answer lies not in the battle against the monster itself, but in the transformation of the self. The real monsters are not the ones we face outside, they are the ones we battle within. The moon hung heavy in the night sky, casting a silver glow on the forest. The air was thick with silence, save for the crunching of leaves beneath weary feet. Every step taken felt like a beat in a forgotten drum, echoing through the trees. Somewhere, just ahead, the flicker of torchlight danced in the distance, drawing closer with each passing moment. In the heart of the forest, an ancient temple stood, its stone pillars worn by time. Yet, at its entrance, something darker waited. It wasn't just a guardian, it was something far more formidable. A creature whose very presence seemed to weigh down the air with ancient knowledge. It was a monster, yes, but not the kind that simply lurked in shadows or waited to destroy. This one had a purpose. It stood as a sentinel, not just to protect, but to teach. Monsters, in many cultures, are far more than grotesque creatures of terror. They are often guardians, silent protectors of wisdom, truth, and enlightenment. They are obstacles, but not for the sake of cruelty. No, they exist to challenge, to test, and to ultimately offer something precious in return. The monsters that stand between us and the greatest truths are not merely obstacles, they are the keys to unlocking understanding, the teachers disguised in the most fearsome forms. One of the most profound stories comes from the tale of the great sage Vishvamitra. In his pursuit of spiritual power, Vishvamitra had to face a monstrous force, Tataka, a demoness whose very existence was a barrier to his quest. Fierce and unyielding, Tataka stood in his way, a creature of terrifying strength and terrible might. But as the sage faced this demoness, he realized something deeper. Tataka was not just a monster to be defeated, but a reflection of something within himself, his own doubts, his own anger, and his own unresolved conflicts. It was only by confronting this monster, by overcoming his inner demons, that Vishvamitra could finally achieve the spiritual heights he longed for. And in that moment of victory, the lesson was clear: facing a monster was not just about defeating it. It was about the transformation that came from the struggle. The path to wisdom often runs through the most terrifying places. In the myth of Lord Shiva and his battle against the demon Andhaka, a similar truth emerges. Andhaka, blinded by his own ambition, believed he could challenge the gods themselves. He became a monster in every sense of the word, an embodiment of unchecked desire and greed. Yet, it was only through his defeat that the divine lesson became clear. Andhaka's monstrous form was not his punishment, it was his truth. He was a reflection of what happens when human desires are left unchecked, when the quest for power consumes the soul. Through this battle, the gods, and even the very universe itself, were reminded that wisdom lies in restraint and the balance between desire and duty. To defeat the monster was to recognize this balance, to see that power and wisdom are not the same. One must control the other, or risk becoming the monster oneself. There are countless tales in Indian mythology where monsters are more than mere threats. The Rakshasas, those demonic creatures that terrorized the land, were often defeated not with brute force, but with the wisdom of those who faced them. Take the story of Ram and Ravana, where the great demon king Ravana, despite his vast knowledge and strength, was ultimately brought down not just by war, but by the very wisdom of Ram. Ravana's monster-like nature was not only the source of his downfall, it was also a mirror of the consequences of his actions. His arrogance, his pride, and his failure to heed the lessons of humility became the monster that destroyed him. Ram's victory was not just over Ravana's physical form, but over the darkness that clouded his judgment. The monster was a teacher in disguise, showing that wisdom often comes from facing the darkness within. In these tales, the monsters stand as obstacles, yes, but obstacles meant to challenge the hero, to make them better, stronger, and more aware of themselves. Each battle, each encounter, carries with it a deeper meaning. The monster is a test. It asks the hero, are you ready to learn? Are you ready to see beyond the surface and confront what lies beneath? Even the most fearsome of monsters, the terrifying serpents like Ahi, are not just agents of chaos. They symbolize the ancient forces of nature, the wild, untamed aspects of the world that must be understood, not destroyed. These creatures are guardians of the sacred knowledge that lies beyond human comprehension. To defeat them is not to annihilate them, but to understand them, to see the divine in what seems monstrous. Only by understanding the serpent's nature, by acknowledging the forces of creation and destruction it represents, can one hope to transcend the limits of the human experience and reach the highest levels of wisdom. In the battle against the mythical Kumbhakarna, the monstrous giant who slept for years, we find another lesson. His slumber, a result of his own desires, was a metaphor for ignorance, the inability to see beyond the material world. The gods, in their wisdom, knew that the only way to defeat Kumbhakarna was to wake him from his ignorance, to show him the consequences of his sloth. His defeat was not just a physical battle, it was an awakening. It was a realization that true wisdom comes from understanding the balance between action and stillness, between effort and surrender. The monsters in Indian mythology are not mere villains to be vanquished, they are the tests that heroes must face. They embody the inner struggles we all face, the temptations, the fears, and the flaws that we must confront in order to grow. The greatest monsters often lie not in the external world, but in our own hearts. They are the parts of us that we would rather not acknowledge, our pride, our greed, our ignorance. It is only by confronting these monsters that we can truly grow, that we can achieve the wisdom we seek. The monsters are not our enemies, but our guides, pushing us toward the understanding that we are all, in some way, monsters ourselves. And in this realization, we find the path to enlightenment. When we face the monsters in the stories, whether it's the fearsome demon, the monstrous shapeshifter, or the serpent that represents the forces of the universe, we are faced with more than just danger. We are faced with ourselves. And in this confrontation, in this battle, we emerge wiser, stronger, and more aware of the fragile beauty of life. These monsters, then, are not just here to frighten, they are here to teach. They show us that true wisdom is not found in avoiding fear, but in facing it, in understanding it, and in transforming it into something that guides us toward a deeper truth. There's a rustle in the streets. It's late, and the city is quiet. The sound of hurried footsteps echoes against the concrete, a nervous rhythm that is almost in sync with the pulse of the night. The wind stirs the newspapers on the ground, flipping them over to revealed headlines screaming of a new horror, something sinister, something strange, creeping into the heart of modern India. The fear, it seems, has evolved. No longer are we just haunted by the ancient creatures that lurk in shadows or in the distant corners of temples. No, now the monsters walk among us in the day, invisible yet palpable, slipping through the cracks of our modern lives. What are they? And how did they come to be? Today's monsters are not confined to the dark forests or remote villages. They are not the mythic serpents or shape-shifting demons of yore. These monsters have changed, morphed, and evolved to reflect the world we live in. They are not always the grotesque and horrific creatures that threaten with claws and fangs. Often, they are something much more insidious. They might be the flashing lights of an invisible system, the cold glint of corporate greed, or the overwhelming rush of technological advancement that leaves little room for humanity to breathe. The monsters of today are more real, and in many ways, they are harder to fight. The figure that haunts the streets now is the specter of social media addiction. It's an ever-present entity, creeping into the pockets of our lives with a swipe and a click. The endless scroll, an action so mindless, yet so compulsive, becomes the feeding ground for this modern monster. It doesn't need to hide in the shadows because it has already taken control. The idea of identity, of self, has become blurred, entangled in a digital world where reality often loses its meaning. People become the avatars they create, and the lines between real emotions and carefully crafted images blur until they disappear. It's a monster of our own making, one that promises connection but delivers loneliness. Then there's the monster of inequality, with its face hidden behind the smooth veneer of progress. In every corner of India, there are people fighting invisible battles. These battles are not fought with swords, but with words, words that carry weight in boardrooms, in government offices, and classrooms. These words build walls, leaving communities isolated, crushed beneath the weight of their own silence. The rich grow richer, the poor struggle to survive. The monster of inequality is not a single creature, but a series of systems that feed off each other, growing stronger and more insidious over time. It's not always the loudest monster, but it is the one that makes its victims feel the most invisible. But let's not forget the monster that wears the face of tradition. There's something chilling about how deeply embedded fear can be in society's expectations. The demon of societal pressure is everywhere, demanding conformity, stifling individuality, and suffocating the spirit. It whispers, telling you that you must be a certain way to fit in, that your worth is defined by your achievements, your family, or your social status. The monster wears a smile, dresses in familiar clothes, but it has the power to crush dreams and break hearts. It's the force that tells you that what you are is not enough, and it's everywhere, lurking just beneath the surface of normal life. At the same time, technology has given birth to new fears, ones that we don't fully understand yet. Artificial intelligence, once a dream, is becoming a reality. Machines that think and learn are taking over jobs, creating a sense of dread that we are losing control over our own world. In a way, These machines represent a cold, heartless monster, an entity that doesn't feel, doesn't care, and yet has the power to outthink and outpace humanity. As AI becomes smarter, more intuitive, the question arises, what happens when these monsters grow too powerful? What happens when they become self-aware? Yet, not all of today's monsters are created from the darkness of fear. Some of them are born from hope and desire, yet twist into something dangerous. Think of the greed-fueled monsters of the corporate world, faceless giants who consume everything in their path. These monsters wear the guise of progress, promising growth and prosperity, but in their wake, they leave broken communities, devastated ecosystems, and countless lives that never had a chance to thrive. The pursuit of success and wealth becomes a monster that feeds on itself, growing larger and more destructive, until it leaves nothing behind but ashes. But there's a twist to this evolution. These modern monsters, for all their power, are not invincible. In every myth, there is always the possibility of change, of a hero rising up to challenge the beast. The question now is not just how we fight these monsters, but how we can find the strength within to see them for what they are, reflections of our own weaknesses and failures. To face them, we need to understand them, to understand that the monsters of today are born from the same fears, desires, and choices that have plagued humanity for centuries. The struggle is not just against a creature that can be slain with a sword or a curse. These monsters are insidious because they live inside us, whispering in our ears, shaping the choices we make. They are the manifestation of our collective anxieties, our desire for power, for acceptance, for progress, and our inability to see where those desires might lead. They don't lurk in the shadows, they are the shadows, dancing on the walls of our modern world. As we navigate through this evolving landscape of monsters, we must ask ourselves, what does it take to defeat them? How do we reclaim our humanity when we are constantly fighting invisible, yet all-encompassing forces? Perhaps, just as in the ancient stories, the key lies not in defeating the monster outright, but in understanding it, and facing the fears that give rise to it, and in finding the courage to stand firm in the face of overwhelming odds. The monsters of today may look different from those of the past, but their power remains the same. They still haunt our dreams, our ambitions, and our deepest insecurities. And though we may not always know how to fight them, we know one thing for certain, they are not the end of the story. We are. The night sky stretches endlessly above, the stars twinkling like 1,000 eyes watching from the heavens. Beneath them, a cosmic dance takes place, where gods and monsters meet, not as enemies, but as inevitable partners. There is a rhythm to it, a beat that echoes through time, a pulse that binds creation and destruction together in a delicate balance. The gods stand tall, shining with divine power, their forms perfect and unyielding. The monsters, twisted and wild, lurk in the shadows, their ferocity unmatched, their power raw. But together, they are part of something much larger than themselves. This eternal dance is not one of conflict, but of necessity. Each step, each movement, builds the world around them. The gods, in their divine wisdom, know that creation cannot exist without destruction, just as light cannot exist without darkness. And in the chaos of destruction, there is rebirth. The monsters, born from the deepest fears and desires, are not merely obstacles to be overcome. They are the wild force of nature, the untamed, the chaotic energy that is just as essential to the world as the gods themselves. In ancient times, the gods created the world, shaping it with their divine hands. But in the shadows, the monsters began to stir. Their existence was not born of malice, but of a need to balance the overwhelming forces of creation. For every temple built, for every city that rose from the ground, there were creatures waiting, their very being a reminder of the fragility of the human world. They were the guardians of the unknown, the manifestations of fears that every soul harbors deep within. The monsters came in many forms, serpents that slithered through the earth, demons that took shape in the mist, or beasts whose roar could shatter mountains. They were not all evil, some were protectors, others tricksters, and still others the embodiment of primal forces too powerful to be contained. The gods knew that their creation needed them. Without the monsters, the gods would be too strong, too perfect, and their world would be stagnant, lifeless. In every battle between gods and monsters, there was an exchange. The gods would fight to restore balance, but in doing so, they too would grow. The monsters would die, but their essence would remain, woven into the fabric of the universe. But not all monsters were vanquished. Some slipped away into the darkness, leaving behind only whispers and legends. The stories of these creatures lived on, passed from generation to generation, reminding humanity that the world was not as it seemed. The monsters, whether in the form of terrible beasts or forces of nature, were not merely myths to be feared. They were reflections of the human experience. In them, one could see the darkness inside of themselves, the fears they tried to hide, the desires they tried to suppress, and the rage they had no words for. It's said that in every legend, there is a truth waiting to be discovered. The monsters in these stories were not just warnings, but teachers. They showed that to know the light, one must understand the dark. They taught that every hero who faced a monster had to look into the abyss of their own soul, face their deepest fears, and accept the parts of themselves that they wanted to deny. The victory wasn't just over the creature, but over the self. And through that victory, there was growth, enlightenment, and transformation. But this dance of gods and monsters is not limited to the past. It continues to this very day, in every corner of the world, in every moment of our lives. We no longer face monstrous serpents or winged demons, but the monsters are still here, hiding behind the masks of modernity. They take on new shapes, perhaps the suffocating weight of societal expectations, the isolation of the digital world, or the haunting call of forgotten dreams. Yet they are still vital. They still push us to look deeper, to question, to grow. In the age of technology, the gods may seem distant, their forms lost in the glowing screens that dominate our lives. But the monsters, they remain. They are the fears we cannot shake, the anxieties we try to ignore, the anger that builds inside us when we feel helpless. In a world that prizes order and perfection, the monsters are the wildness we cannot tame. They are the raw, untapped potential, the forces of change that are both terrifying and necessary. As we look around us, we can see that the balance of creation and destruction still exists. It's in the way the earth gives birth to new life after a forest fire. It's in the way a person's heart breaks before it learns to love again. It's in the way we fight for justice, only to discover new battles we hadn't seen before. The monsters of today might not have the fangs and claws of ancient tales, but they are just as powerful, just as destructive, and just as transformative. In every corner of our world, in the stories we tell, in the struggles we face, the eternal dance continues. The gods and monsters move together, shaping the world as they always have, reminding us that there can be no creation without destruction, no light without darkness. We may fight the monsters in our lives, but in doing so, we learn to see the world through different eyes. We grow, we change, and we evolve. And so, the monsters remain. They are not to be feared or forgotten, but embraced for the lessons they carry. For in the shadows they cast, we find the truth of our own hearts. In their battles with the gods, we understand the power of our own will. They are not simply creatures of terror, they are guardians of wisdom, holding the secrets of the universe within their monstrous forms. Without them, the world would be incomplete, a place of endless light but no depth. It is only when we face the darkness, when we confront the monsters, that we truly come to understand the light. And so the dance goes on, eternal, unbroken, as gods and monsters continue to shape the world, and in their union, the balance of all things is kept.